Chapter 1. The sky of Cloud City was dark, and it was drizzling intermittently. Near the spawn point of the Mage Academy, two NPC merchants were surrounded. One of them sold brooms, and the other black-rimmed glasses. Harry Potter's promotion of the old theme of magic was something even the newest holographic MMORPG's parallel world couldn't avoid. These two NPCs, with the standard Harry Potter look, ruthlessly slaughtered the new players. It must be known that the system would only give out an additional 50 copper coins for new players, but these two useless decorations cost 125 copper coins each, adding up to exactly 250 copper coins. Even so, the enthusiasm of the players didn't diminish. They worked hard for the whole day, just for this 250. The entire Mage Academy was filled with robes, black-rimmed glasses, and broom-wielding players. In this jubilant atmosphere, however, there was one person who was frowning. Gu Fei, wearing a mage robe, stood in the middle of the school square, looking at the happy crowd around him. Other than sighing, he couldn't think of anything else to do. The last class he wanted to be was a mage. But he just had to become a mage. This was all the fault of the student called Afit. Gu Fei was a teacher in the school, and he accidentally overheard a few students discussing this holographic MMORPG. After asking around for a while, the student named A.F.A. fawningly gave him an account number. Who knew that good intentions could make a mistake? A.F.A. actually carelessly gave his account to Gu Fei, which he had already set up his class and name. Gu Fei only realized this after he entered the game after receiving a holographic scan and identity binding. This was the first time holographic technology was used in this MMORPG, and it received unprecedented attention. Due to the limited capacity of the game server, the officials could only send out a limited number of accounts, and each identity was limited to one. In the end, if Gu Fei wanted to play this game, he could only be a mage. Looking at the latest holographic equipment he bought, it would be a pity not to play. In the end, Gu Fei entered the game. Unfortunately, he didn't choose the class he wanted, and the purpose of the game was completely lost. At this time, Gu Fei stood in the city, not knowing what to do. While he was at a loss, he suddenly saw a few mages running back from the Mage Academy, dragging their tattered robes and bruised faces. Gu Fei saw a short and skinny figure among them and subconsciously shouted, "Af!" This was the student with poor grades, poor sports, and ordinary looks. Other than a glib tongue, there was nothing special about him. In school, he was the kind of person whose grandmother didn't care about him and his uncle didn't love him. Gu Fei's mage account came from him. Encountering him in the game, Gu Fei tried very hard to resist the urge to beat him up. After all, he didn't do it on purpose. Moreover, he had to be a role model. When A.F.A. heard someone calling him, he looked up and saw Gu Fei. He staggered over. "Hello, teacher," A.F.A. said. All right, you don't have to be like this," Gu Fei quickly said. Being greeted like this by a student in the game was an extremely embarrassing thing. Many players around them heard this and looked over curiously. "How did you end up like this?" Gu Fei pulled A.F.A. away from the crowd before asking. A.F.A. took 2 deep breaths. I didn't expect this. I was just strolling around the city, and I got beaten up." "What level are you?" Gu Fei asked curiously. Other than the spawn point, there were no safe zones in the game. Gu Fei knew this, but piking protections still existed for low-level players. Players below level 5 couldn't be piked. "I just spawned, I haven't leveled up yet," A.F.A. said. "Then how did I get piked?" Gu Fei didn't understand. "It's not piked, it's being beaten up," A.F.A. said. "What's the difference?" Gu Fei didn't understand. "Teacher, piking requires in-game skills to reduce in-game health. But now that it's a holographic simulation, they beat me up like a normal street fight. Even though my health didn't decrease, but it really hurts." A.F.A. touched the corner of his mouth and grimaced. "There's actually someone like this?" Gu Fei was shocked. "Yeah. I didn't expect something like this to happen in a holographic simulation," A.F.A. said. "Holographic simulation?" Gu Fei muttered these words to himself. "I'll go take a look." Gu Fei suddenly walked out. "Wait." A.F.A. pulled Gu Fei back. "Teacher, you're a sorcerer too. Your physique and strength are inferior to those knights. We can't win this kind of fight. Gu Fei patted Afei's head and said, "Did you forget? Teacher knows Kung Fu." Then he turned and left. Teacher. Afei stared at Gu Fei's back in a daze. Teacher Gu Fei knows Kung Fu. This sentence was a joke in Yulin Middle School. Even the principal had a private discussion. What is shameless? Teacher Gu Fei kept saying that him knowing Kung Fu is the most shameless thing I've ever seen in my life. Gu Fei was indeed a better jumper, faster, more nimble, and more powerful. In the eyes of a normal person, it was completely reasonable for a physical education teacher to have this kind of performance. But Gu Fei just had to say that he had been practicing Kung Fu since he was young. That's why he had this body of steel muscles and bones. No one believed him. Because there was a widely circulated video on Yulin High's school website. It was recorded by a surveillance camera installed at the school gate. Someone had nothing better to do and uploaded it online. In the video, a young man was beaten black and blue by an old man at the school gate. He was rolling on the ground without any ability to retaliate. The title of this video was "Vigorous in Old Age." The male lead was, of course, the old man. As for the second male lead, according to research, it was the self-proclaimed undefeatable teacher Gu Fei. After this experience, who would believe that Gu Fei knew Kung Fu? Everyone thought that he had read too many wuxia novels and had lost his mind. Fortunately, although Gu Fei said he knew Kung Fu, he did not have any violent tendencies. His teaching attitude was considered serious, so it did not affect him further. But now, Fa saw that Gu Fei had already walked out of the Mage Academy's gate and was turning back to shout at him, "Which way?" Fa subconsciously pointed to the right, and Gu Fei strode away. Fa was stunned for a moment before he reacted and hurriedly chased after him. The simulation of the game was undoubtedly done very well. The cobblestone road was a little uncomfortable, but Gu Fei was running as fast as he could. Fa, who was running behind him, was sweating profusely. He saw Gu Fei stop at another intersection. "Where are they?" Seeing Fa chasing after him, Gu Fei turned his head and asked. "They were over there just now." Fa pointed at the pond in the middle of the plaza. "Teacher, don't go over there." Fa shouted when he saw Gu Fei advancing. Gu Fei turned back and smiled. "Don't come over. Teacher will be back soon." The back view of a person dragging his mage robe made him look weak, but Gu Fei's figure gave off an unusual sense of confidence and confidence. "Fuck, I'll just get beaten up at most. It's just a game. The real me won't get hurt." Fa muttered to himself and chased after him. But Gu Fei was already nowhere to be seen. Fa looked around as he walked. Suddenly, he heard a series of screams coming from an alley nearby. Fa hurried over and poked his head out to look. In the alley, 4 people in knight's light armor were grabbing a skinny man and beating him up. The sound of fists hitting flesh was bone-chilling. The person being beaten had a crooked nose and mouth. His body and face were covered in blood. It was hard to tell what class he was from his equipment. But even if he was a warrior with the toughest skin, he was still a normal person. He was powerless against the attacks of 4 strong men. He had already lost the ability to resist. After being punched heavily into the corner, he curled up and didn't make a sound. The 4 people who beat him up all had fierce faces. One look and you could tell that they weren't kind people. But at this moment, they stopped because Gu Fei had already appeared in front of them. No one said anything. When the 4 people saw Gu Fei's mage robe, they suddenly looked at each other and smiled knowingly. "Let him go," Gu Fei said. "You mean him?" The fiercest of the 4 raised his leg and kicked the pitiful person curled up in the corner. He gave the other 3 people beside him a look. The 4 slowly moved and surrounded Gu Fei. Originally, they were all on guard against Gu Fei turning around and running away. Who knew that Gu Fei would stand still and let the 4 people surround him? The fiercely built man, who was obviously the leader, had a flash of surprise in his eyes. But after carefully sizing up Gu Fei, he felt a little relieved. The guy in front of him wasn't tall. The mage robe in the game didn't hide his well-proportioned body. He had broad shoulders, a thin waist, and long legs. With a body like this, it was obvious that he paid attention to training. His body wasn't bad. Of course, he wouldn't be too bad in a fight. But this was a game. No matter how good his body was in real life, in the game, speed, strength, and physique were completely determined by the game stats. This guy was a mage. His strength and physique were the weakest. One punch from him could make him scream in pain for a long time. It seemed like the highly realistic environment made him forget that he was in a game. Without any pleasantries, the leader only said one word, "Go." Chapter 2. The two guys on the left and right rushed up together, while the other guy retreated to the entrance of the alley to prevent Gu Fei from escaping. The two guys arrived in the blink of an eye, one punching and the other kicking. Gu Fei calmly took a step back and dodged the attacks from both sides. He then lifted his left leg and kicked the guy on the left in the face, but when he wanted to kick with his right leg, he found that the guy on the right had already retreated to the side in surprise. Gu Fei smiled bitterly. If this was in real life, his double flight of the Swallow and Lao wouldn't have only kicked one person. But now in the game, his speed was completely limited by the poor stats of a mage, and he couldn't use this move at all, only able to use half of it. Moreover, his strength was weakened even more. The guy on the left just covered his face and looked at him in shock after being kicked. If this was in real life, he would be unconscious for at least 4 to 5 hours after being kicked in the head. He really has some skills. The leader's expression changed, but he didn't panic too much. Gu Fei's kick had hit its mark, but its power was clearly limited. He immediately shouted, "He's just a mage, no need to be afraid." After shouting, he rushed over to join the fight. Gu Fei wandered between the three. Although Gu Fei's strength and health were extremely weak because of his mage's physique, his mage's agility was still passable. At least now that everyone was a newbie and hadn't leveled up, the difference wasn't that obvious. Gu Fei threw a punch or a kick from time to time, and with his rich combat experience, he hit his opponents with every move. So far, the three guys hadn't even touched the corner of Gu Fei's clothes. The leader was getting more and more surprised. This guy had more than just a few skills. Fortunately, he was a mage. If it was someone with more strength, the three of them would have been beaten to the ground by him. Gu Fei felt helpless at this time. Because of various restrictions, he couldn't use many of his skills at all. It seemed that even if he chose a profession like a fighter, he still couldn't use his skills without the support of the points after leveling up. On the other hand, although he was a magician now, as long as he leveled up and spent his points on agility and strength, he would still have a chance to show off his skills. When he thought of this, Gu Fei couldn't help but become spirited. When the three fellows saw that not only were they unable to do anything to Gu Fei, but he was also getting more and more spirited as he fought, and just a moment ago he was still showing a very comfortable smile, they panicked even more. In Gu Fei's eyes, the chopping and brick-wielding skills of street thugs were full of loopholes. Gu Fei was not in the mood to get entangled with these guys. He found a chance to get out of the ring and said with a smile, "Do you still want to continue?" The three of them had received quite a number of kicks and punches from Gu Fei. Although he did not use much strength, the accumulated blows were not easy to bear. Especially when Gu Fei deliberately hit the same part repeatedly. At this time, among the three of them, the one on the left had a black eye, the one on the right had a black eye, and the one in the middle had a nosebleed. He was afraid that the nosebleed would enter his mouth when he spoke, so he raised his head and wiped his hand before saying to the other three, "Let's go." Wait. Gu Fei said, "You want to leave without apologizing after beating us up?" "Apologize?" The leader laughed, "You can't kill me, why should I apologize?" This was true. Gu Fei had been entangled for so long, but he had only caused 2 black eye circles and 2 nosebleeds. This was not an unbearable injury. As for death, that was even more impossible. To die in the game, one's HP would have to be 0. But in this situation, although they were beaten black and blue, their HP was not reduced at all. This could be said to be a big bug in the game. Gu Fei just smiled faintly, bent over to pick up a piece of gravel from the ground, and suddenly raised his hand, smacking the leader in the head. The leader was furious. If I hit your eyes, what would you do now?" Gu Fei said calmly. The leader was stunned. He thought that Gu Fei would just hit him casually, but from his tone, it seemed that he would hit wherever he wanted. "Your eyes are still fine in reality, but in the game, you will be blind from then on. Don't forget, This is a holographic simulation game. Gu Fei said. The leader was scared and took 2 steps back, but then he thought about it. Hitting the eyes just like that? How could there be such a magical thing? He immediately felt relieved and laughed. Kid, who are you trying to scare? Gu Fei didn't say anything. He stretched out his leg and picked up a gravel, swinging his right arm. With a scream, the leader covered his right eye and fell to the ground. He rolled back and forth, screaming over and over again. The pain of being blinded and having a black eye were not on the same level. You still have one eye, Gu Fei said to the man rolling on the ground. With that said, he raised his leg and 2 pieces of gravel flew up. Gu Fei clenched his fist and glanced at the other 2 people beside the leader. I have 2 pieces of gravel with me this time. I'm sorry. The 2 people were completely scared out of their wits by the sight of the leader rolling on the ground and screaming. They stammered out an apology. Let's go. Gu Fei waved his hand, and the 2 people hurriedly dragged the leader up. This person covered his right eye with one hand, and his left eye was also tightly shut. He was in so much pain that his whole body was trembling. He stammered, "Oh, quick, help me go." The other 2 people were stunned and hurriedly helped him leave. As for the guy who was guarding the alley earlier, he had already disappeared. Fa, who was hiding in the alley and watching the live broadcast, was dumbfounded. He only came back to his senses when the few people ran out of sight. He rushed into the alley and looked at Gu Fei in shock. Teacher, you really know Kung Fu? Of course, I've been practicing Kung Fu since I was young. Gu Fei's words were no different from what he usually said in school. Even his tone and expression had not changed. Gu Fei indeed knew Kung Fu. He was born into a Kung Fu family and had been practicing Kung Fu since he was young. The members of the family each had their own careers, but internally, they all had a unified goal, which was to pass on and promote Chinese Kung Fu. Although that was what he said, Gu Fei felt that other than himself and his father, no one cared about this matter anymore. His uncle's generation all had some skills, but when it came to his generation, he did not even have an opponent to spar with. Not only that, but they were also filled with disdain towards Gu Fei, who had been focused on practicing Kung Fu since he was young. What era is it now? The sky is full of planes, and the streets are full of computers. Kung Fu? Can Kung Fu be eaten? Gu Fei proved it to them, but in the end he was even more despised. Reality was very helpless. In this era, Kung Fu was indeed difficult to eat. In the sports world, which seemed to be the easiest area for Kung Fu to be used, Gu Fei tried one after another. In some events, he repeatedly broke the rules because he could not grasp the rules, such as raising the foot too high in football, or hitting people with the ball in basketball. In some events, he could not do it even if he had Kung Fu, such as chess events. There were also some events where Gu Fei had a congenital defect, such as swimming, diving, and other water events. Gu Fei did not know how to swim. Even if it was a Kung Fu event, Gu Fei could not make it. The Kung Fu that Gu Fei practiced focused on training his body and fighting skills. This made him have no advantage in performing Kung Fu events, and his father strictly prohibited him from participating in Kung Fu events that could really bring out his strength. We practice Kung Fu to train ourselves and break through the limits of the human body, not to fight. His father said earnestly, "Isn't breaking through the limits of the human body to make it easier to knock down the opponent?" Gu Fei was puzzled. "You're wrong. The best way to knock down the opponent is with a pistol." His father said, "With a pistol?" His father nodded solemnly. "Yes, with a pistol." But, before Gu Fei could finish his sentence, his father responded with a punch. He was a Kung Fu family. Since he could not explain it, he could only fight with his fists. That year, his father was still quite healthy, and his Kung Fu was even better than Gu Fei's. Moreover, Gu Fei could not really fight with his father, so he was naturally beaten to a pulp. That day was the day that Gu Fei came to Yulin for an interview. In the end, after being eliminated from all the sports events, Gu Fei still managed to stay in the sports world, if being a PE teacher counted. And because the scene of him being beaten by his father outside the school gate was filmed and spread, when Gu Fei promoted Kung Fu in Yulin, he was labeled as shameless. Was it really difficult for Kung Fu to survive in today's society? Gu Fei was extremely sad. Nowadays he rarely attended family gatherings. In the past, the older generation thought that Gu Fei insisted on passing on Kung Fu and regarded him as a role model for the family to educate the younger generation. But now, seeing that his peers were all well-dressed and well-behaved, while Gu Fei had fallen to the point of being a PE teacher, the older generation began to hesitate. Except for Gu Fei's father, no one believed that Gu Fei was the most promising person. His father was still adamant on the idea that Kung Fu is not for fighting. "I won't allow you to hurt anyone with Kung Fu," his father said resolutely. "Not even the bad guys?" Gu Fei asked. "No." His father was very sure. "The bad guys will naturally be punished by the police and the law." "Then, what's the use of Kung Fu?" Gu Fei was distressed. He hated that he could not understand everything like his father, so he was always wondering what Kung Fu could be used for. Chapter 3. Parallel World. During class that day, Gu Fei suddenly felt a glimmer of hope when he overheard a few guys discussing the upcoming holographic technology online game. He knew what holographic technology meant. Since he couldn't fully utilize it in real life, he should be able to use it in the game, right? Gu Fei bought a full set of holographic simulation equipment on the same day and decided on his class, Grandmaster of Combat. A warrior who can use every part of his body to fight? Just from this sentence alone, Gu Fei was certain that this was the most suitable class for him. Unfortunately, because of Fei's students' muddle-headedness, he became the weakest and most unsuitable class for close combat in the game, Mage. Gu Fei had been completely disheartened, but after experiencing what had just happened, he had realized that the difference in class attributes in the game was only relative to the class skills in the game. To him, it meant that he already had a full set of skills of the class. As long as he added points to his skills, it didn't matter which class he was. Of course, if he was a Grandmaster of Combat, the attributes of this class would definitely be more suitable for his Kung Fu. However, being a mage didn't mean that he was useless. He would become a Kung Fu mage. A groan interrupted Gu Fei's thoughts. The guy in the corner was struggling to get up. "Teacher." Afi didn't dare to go forward and raised his head to look at Gu Fei. Gu Fei quickly walked over and helped him up. "How are you?" I'm fine. The guy stood up and took a deep breath. Even though his face was still injured, he still exuded a scholarly aura. It was no wonder that such a refined person was chosen as the target of bullying. Gu Fei and Fei helped him to sit down beside the fountain in the center of the plaza. The guy turned around and scooped up some water from the fountain to wipe his face. He looked much more energetic now. He turned around and smiled at Gu Fei. "Hello, I'm Hongchen Xiao." Gu Fei immediately knew that it was a name from the game. He immediately used his own name, Qianli Drunk. This name was created by Qi, and it sounded like a drunkard. This made Gu Fei a little depressed. The two of them shook hands. As for Fei, he was obviously still a kid. Hongchen Xiao directly ignored him. "This is the first time we've used holographic technology in an online game. We knew that something unexpected would happen, but we didn't expect something like this to happen," Hongchen Xiao said, raising his head. "Oh, from what you're saying, you sound like a staff member of the game." Gu Fei said. Fei perked up. He could be considered an experienced online gamer. Game staff. This name seemed to imply endless benefits. It could be as small as revealing some insider information, or as big as helping to get some top-tier equipment. Players would despise and condemn these unprofessional staff members when they didn't meet them. But once they did, they would worship them as if they were their own fathers. Red Dust smiled as he nodded towards the sky and said, "Not long after the open beta started today, I heard a report that a group of new players were using their in-game classes to beat up mages and other classes. I came in to take a look, but I didn't expect to get beaten up." "How are we going to deal with this?" Gu Fei asked. "I don't know yet," Hongchen Xiao said. "Let's see what the technical team will do. There are quite a lot of problems with the game. It looks like there's still some time before it can officially start collecting fees." Gu Fei and Fei saw that Hongchen Xiao kept looking up at the sky, so they looked up as well. The drizzle was still falling, and in the blink of an eye, their faces were wet. "Is this guy still washing his face?" Gu Fei muttered to himself and lowered his head. What are you two looking at? He didn't expect Hongshan Yixiao to ask first. What are you two looking at? Fei asked back. My nose can't stop bleeding, little brother. Hongshan Yixiao said. The two were speechless. After a while, Hongshan Yixiao lowered his head and rubbed his nose. All right, I'm going to look around somewhere else. What about you guys? I'm going to level up, Gu Fei said. He couldn't wait to find out if this weak mage's body would be able to unleash his martial arts after he spent all his points on leveling up. Fa hesitated for a moment, then looked at Hongshan Yixiao. I want to go with you. Hongshan Yixiao smiled. Little brother, I'm a self-disciplined gamer. Don't expect to get any benefits from me. Having his intentions seen through, Fa's face turned red in embarrassment. He said sheepishly, I didn't mean it that way. I just want to familiarize myself with you in the game. Then let's go. Hongshan Yixiao smiled and turned to Gu Fei. Do you want to familiarize yourself with the game too? He purposely emphasized the word familiarize. Fei's face turned even redder. No need, you guys go. Gu Fei waved at the two. After parting ways with the two, Gu Fei impatiently rushed out of Cloud City and toward the leveling zone. The leveling area around the city was always the lowest leveled area, and the parallel world was no exception. Even the monsters here were nothing new. They were all Tom, Dick, Harry, and Rabbit. They looked friendly and should have been the best friends of humans. Also, because of the use of holographic technology, the little animals were animated and extremely cute. In addition, these low-level monsters couldn't fight back. Only the little pug would whimper after being slapped. After kicking a certain dog twice, Gu Fei really couldn't bear to kill it. Looking around, the player's eyes were filled with hesitation. The guy in front of him held a meat knife and stabbed at Nie Yen. Gu Fei dodged to the side and threw a punch, which hit. This time was different from the fight with people in the city. Because of the PK protection, the previous fight only had pain simulated by holographic technology. There was nothing else. But now that he was fighting with monsters, even a mage with the weakest physical attack could still cause damage with a punch. After taking a punch from Gu Fei, the guy only shook a little, and the almost rusty meat knife stabbed at him again. Gu Fei dodged and punched again. The six of them surrounded him, and Gu Fei weaved through them with ease, his fists and feet landing on the opponent from time to time. Gu Fei didn't know how high the levels of these six guys were, but compared to the normal fight with the four players, this fight was easier and more boring. Gu Fei was already a little disappointed with holographic technology. Now it seemed that it was just a simulation of a very realistic scene. But these NPC monsters still had the distinct low AI of ordinary online games. In Gu Fei's eyes, there was no difference between repetitive and monotonous attacks. They didn't know how to actively dodge the player's attacks, and only calculated by hit and dodge data. It was only a matter of time before they were knocked down. Gu Fei began to consciously distribute his punches evenly among the six guys. After a few more minutes, one of the NPCs finally let out a final roar filled with indignation and fell. Then, with a few punches and 2 kicks, the remaining 5 guys were also on the ground. In the meantime, Gu Fei kept flashing, and the unknown level of these monsters helped him level up to 6. Chapter 4. The parallel world had 5 basic attributes: constitution, strength, dexterity, intelligence, and spirit. Every increase in level would reward 5 attribute points. Without hesitation, Gu Fei added all the points to dexterity. He then waved his fists and legs. As expected, his movements were much faster than before. He was overjoyed. If this continued, not only would he be able to return to his normal level, but he could also reach a speed that he couldn't reach in real life if he continued to add points to the game. Gu Fei didn't want to be so crazy. He just wanted to return to his real self. He planned to add the extra points to strength so that his attack power would be like his real self. He was too weak now. Gu Fei clenched his fists. However, since it was a game, he had to loot the monsters that he defeated. After adding points, Gu Fei began to search the 6 monsters. In the end, he found 2 meat knives and 6 small money pouches. The monsters weren't very rich. Each money pouch only had a dozen or so copper coins. Gu Fei put all of them into his own money pouch. He scraped off the rust on the 2 meat knives, lifted his mage robe, and put them at his waist. In order to fully simulate reality, the parallel world didn't have any class restrictions on equipment. It only had some attribute requirements, and most of them were in terms of strength. As for the beginner weapons that didn't have any attribute requirements, anyone could use them. After packing up, Gu Fei turned around and walked to another hill. Another bonfire. 6 brothers. However, before Gu Fei could see if they looked the same as the 6 before, the system sent a notification. Dear player, the game will be disconnected in 10 seconds. Please be prepared to go offline. 10, 9, e. After the countdown, the game was disconnected. The simulation disappeared, and Gu Fei returned to reality. What's going on? Muttering in his heart, Gu Fei connected to the official website. At this time, the developer and operator of the parallel world were sitting together. They were holding an emergency meeting to discuss the problems that had been exposed in the first day of the open beta. Since it was the first holographic game in history, in order to maintain its mysteriousness, the parallel worlds had always been developed in secret, and it was only during the closed beta that it started to be widely publicized. On the other hand, the closed beta was done by the internal staff. Everyone's focus was on the important parts of the game, such as character, missions, skills, and equipment. On the first day of the open beta, there were a lot of problems. Almost all of them were unacceptable due to the use of holographic technology. First of all, according to the information gathered from the player complaint channel, the monsters in the lowest leveling area were too cute, which was the most common complaint. The female players were furious about this, while the male players were afraid that they would be despised by the female players if they killed the cutie, so they were even more dissatisfied with this setting than the female players. Apart from that, the NPCs, buildings, trees, and so on in the game were monotonous and repetitive, which could also be solved through technology. What was truly troublesome were the problems caused by humans. The public beta had only been open for half a day, and the frequent violence in the game had left the game developers at a loss. The simulation of the human sensory system was the core of the entire holographic game, and the violence happened in this most basic framework. There was no way to solve it through technical modifications. After repeated research, it was decided that this type of combat would also be classified as PK, and the range of PK protection would be increased to level 10. As for whether or not there would be a situation where the right hand wielded the in-game weapon to cast skills, and the left hand used the self-developed Monkey Steals Peach for a sneak attack, they could only wait and see. This is good. Realism. Holographic games need realism, that's our original intention. One of the senior staff who attended the meeting comforted everyone. But the following problem couldn't be covered up with realism. Female players were sexually assaulted by male players. The game staff didn't think that holographic technology would expose the dark side of the players so thoroughly. However, because sensory simulation was a complete system, it was not something that the game company's technology could do to eliminate the XX parts. Moreover, this was actually a hidden selling point in the game, and the higher-ups weren't willing to completely ban it. The final solution was to design a choice that respected the wishes of both parties. This stumped the staff of the technical department. Imagine a pair of lovers in a warm and gentle environment, unable to control themselves. Just as they were about to take the next step, a prompt box popped up, XX invitation from XX. Do you accept? Even if they chose yes, the originally harmonious atmosphere would become no. Other than that, how would they control the degree of XX? Only that matter counted as XX? What about a kiss? What about a touch? XX wants to touch you, do you accept? When someone in the meeting hypothetically proposed such a prompt box, everyone felt like vomiting. No matter what, make it first. We can observe the players' reactions and opinions, and then make adjustments. Finally, the big boss made the decision. After discussing a few more issues, the meeting was adjourned, and all the departments immediately got down to work. It was definitely a miracle in the history of online games to have to be rebuilt after only half a day of open beta. Fortunately, they could use the excuse of it was their first time using holographic technology, so they lacked experience to cover it up, but everyone was undoubtedly under a lot of pressure. The big boss looked at the busy figures flashing out one by one and nodded in satisfaction. Then he saw that there was still one person sitting in his seat, not moving, looking at him with a smile. After everyone left, the big boss said, "Little Five, do you have anything else?" "Boss knows me well." The person called Little Five stood up, walked in front of the boss, and pulled a chair to sit down. "Speak." The boss looked at him. This Little Five was a member of the game planning department, one of the core members of the entire game production team. "What I saw today made me feel that there might be some problems with our game," Little Five said. "Because it's a holographic simulation, some people will bring real-life skills into the game. This way, they will have an innate advantage over other players. This is quite detrimental to the balance of the game that we've been pursuing." Little Five said. "What skills will affect the game?" the boss asked. "For example, Kung Fu." "Kung Fu?" Little Five nodded with certainty. "Today in the game, I met a person. He was a mage, and he defeated 3 knights at the same time with his bare hands. I think he's a person who knows Kung Fu." "There really is such a person." The boss frowned. Little Five said, "Think about it, police, military, martial arts, boxing, and so on, all of them can create this imbalance in the game. Then what should we do? We can't stop people from playing our game just because of their profession," the boss said. "There's no other way." Little Five shook his head. The boss laughed. "If there was no other way, you wouldn't have stayed to talk to me." Little Five also laughed. "It's just that this kind of person gave me a revelation." "Speak." "Everything in traditional online games revolves around combat. But now that we're in a holographic simulation, should we increase the development efforts? Other than combat, we should strengthen other system functions so that people who have a skill in life can bring it into the game. This way, it'll be more balanced." Little Five said. "It sounds easy, but it's very difficult to develop," the boss said. "We can try." "Okay, come up with a specific plan, and we'll discuss it in the next meeting," the boss said. "Okay." Little Five was full of joy. "Then I'll go first." "Wait." The boss stopped him. "Hey, why did you enter the game again? Don't tell me you don't know the rules of the gaming world? As a member of the gaming company, you're not allowed to participate in the company's games. Some strict companies don't even allow family members. I've never agreed with this. We come out to make games, so of course we love it. Why should we lose the right to play because of this? Don't worry, I'm a self-disciplined game worker." "In the game, I'm just a normal player," Little Five said. "With your understanding of the game, can you be normal?" The boss said. "Don't worry, I won't touch any of those hidden things, okay?" Little Five said. "I'll find someone to keep an eye on you." "What's your name in the game?" the boss asked. "Hongchen Xiao." Little Five smiled and left the meeting room. Chapter 5. The game was being greatly modified, and the officials announced the progress every day. On the first day, the cute monsters in the leveling area were fixed, and the disgusting wild boars and wolves were replaced with cats, rabbits, and dogs. On the second day, on the third day, the players waited eagerly. Although the last open beta only lasted for half a day, everyone experienced the unprecedented feeling of a holographic game. This time, the anticipation was even stronger than before. Gu Fei was no exception. The first thing he did when he got home was to check on the game's modification progress. Finally, there was a place to show off his skills. Gu Fei often woke up with a smile in his dreams. Because there were too many adjustments, the wait lasted for a month. Little Five's proposal had been approved, but it would be a lot more work to complete it. Therefore, the game company decided to gradually add these in future updates, and the game would start operating again first. Today, Gu Fei had class. After class, he immediately went home and entered the game with anticipation. He hadn't felt this kind of eagerness in a long time. When he went offline, he was still in the wilderness outside the city, but now he was sent back to his birthplace, the Mage Academy. Do I have to start all over again? Gu Fei looked at his level. It hadn't changed, still level 6. The coins he picked up the other day were still in his money bag, and the 2 rusty meat knives were still in his waist. Looking around, he found that the mages were gathered in front of an NPC, in a long line. After confirming that the guy wasn't selling glasses and brooms, Gu Fei also queued up curiously. "What are you doing?" asked Gu Fei. "Learning skills." The person in front of him turned around and glanced at Gu Fei. In order to give the players the ability to protect themselves, the modification this time deliberately lowered the level requirement for learning skills. Players could receive their first skill for free when they were born, and could learn the next skill of their class every 6 levels. So now, the players in the Mage Academy had to do this job in addition to buying glasses and brooms. The team moved quickly, and in the blink of an eye, Gu Fei was already in front of them. Talking to the NPC, Gu Fei had already learned the first mage skill. There was nothing new about it. Fireball seemed to always be the first technique that mages could master. However, Gu Fei was already level 6. In addition to the new Fireball skill, he could also learn a second skill, Ring of Resistance. If Fireball was the main attack skill of beginner mages, then Resistance Ring of Fire was the main skill that beginner mages used to protect their weak bodies. However, as a holographic game, the use of spells had some characteristics. In the center of the Mage Academy's wide plaza, thousands of people gathered together and shouted in unison, "Fireball!" A fireball immediately ignited in front of everyone, floating in the air. It was a spectacular sight. All the mages were beaming with joy, but Gu Fei noticed that the person beside him was pale, as if he had suffered a great shock. Shoot! No one knew who took the lead to shout, but everyone immediately followed suit. The sound of shoot, shoot, shoot came one after another. However, the Mage Academy was an absolute safe zone. Combat skills such as spells were forbidden here. Although the order to shoot was given, Fireball didn't move. However, the person beside him became even paler. Gu Fei couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong with you?" "Damn it." The person cursed and added Gu Fei as a friend. "Look at my name." System notification. Fireball has added you as a friend. Gu Fei immediately laughed out loud. So this person's name was Fireball. No wonder. Thousands of people shouting at the same time made him feel nervous. At this time, people kept learning their first spell, so people kept shouting Fireball in the middle of the plaza. Fireball beside Gu Fei couldn't stand it anymore. He called out to Gu Fei and prepared to leave. "Hee hee, I'm leaving too. It's so noisy." Gu Fei followed behind him. The two left the Mage Academy together and walked towards the leveling area outside of Cloud City. On the way, Fireball complained to Gu Fei. It turned out that he had already chosen his class when he got this account from someone else. Gu Fei suddenly felt that they were in the same boat. However, Fireball didn't care about this at first. It was just that after experiencing the scene of thousands of people shouting at the same time, it started to have some complaints about the name. Thinking about it, in future battles with mages, no matter if they were friend or foe, shouting Fireball would obviously distract them. At the moment, people could only hope that Fireball, the lowest level spell, would be forgotten in the later stages. Gu Fei couldn't help but share his feelings with Fireball. He more or less shared some of the tragic experiences of being forced to use a mage. Fireball didn't understand the internal reasons behind Gu Fei's actions. It only thought that he didn't like the mage class, so it continued to talk about the glorious history of mages. Regardless, Gu Fei had a good impression of Fireball because he was one of the few mages who didn't wear black-rimmed glasses and carried a broom. The two chatted as they walked. In the blink of an eye, they were outside of the city. The changes to the game's title had begun to take effect. At this time, the city was filled with wolves and boars. Learning from the mistakes of the past, these monsters were made to look disgusting. They were the type that people wanted to beat up at first glance. This greatly encouraged the players to level up. The mountains and plains outside the city were filled with people chasing and killing the wolves and boars. Unfortunately, the strength of these wolves and boars was not proportional to their appearance. Under the crazy suppression of the players, they could only fight back with meager strength. For a time, the supply of monsters couldn't meet the demand. As soon as one spawned, a dozen players immediately surrounded it. Fireball's blood was boiling. He took 2 steps forward and shouted, "Fireball!" A fireball slowly rose in front of Fireball. "Shoot!" Fireball shouted. And so, Fireball shot out. With a pew sound, Fireball hit a wild boar that was being ravaged by the players in front of him. Sparks flew everywhere, and with the smell of barbecue, the wild boar fell to the ground. Beautiful! Fireball clenched his fist, praising himself for being so accurate on his first shot. But at this time, the players who were just attacking the wild boar turned their heads together to look at Fireball. Their eyes were clearly looking at a creature that was even more disgusting than the wild boar. "Hello everyone." Fireball waved at the crowd. "Kill stealing. You have no manners." Fireball's greeting was met with curses. Well, weren't you guys just randomly attacking?" Fireball was confused. There were clearly more than a dozen people attacking it. How did it become kill stealing the moment it attacked? Didn't the kill belong to whoever killed it? Are you blind? Can't you see that we're from the same guild? Someone yelled. Guild? Fireball looked at Gu Fei blankly. Gu Fei was also confused. The game had just started. No one had the ability to create a guild. The group nodded in unison. One of them yelled, "You stole our defined guild's kill. You don't want to live anymore?" There was no other guild with a name more heaven-defying than this one. However, Fireball showed no fear in the face of this group of heaven-defying players. This surprised Gu Fei. Fireball looked straight at the crowd and said calmly, "So what if I killed it? What can you do to me? I'm only level 1. Gu Fei smiled. No wonder this guy was so righteous. Since he paid attention to the official website every day, Gu Fei also knew that this change was made in response to the violent incident he had experienced last time. Players who were protected by PK would be immune to skills. Even if they were hit, there would be no corresponding pain. This change also included the player's own attacks in the PK category. This meant that if a fight like last time happened again, Gu Fei wouldn't be able to blind his opponent's eyes. Even if he were hit, it wouldn't hurt. At this time, Fireball relied on the protection and ignored the powerful players in front of him. But players who dared to call themselves overpowered still had the spirit of being overpowered. Seeing Fireball's fearless attitude because he was level 1, he wasn't discouraged at all and swarmed forward. "What are you doing? I'm level 1. Level 1. Level 1. Under Fireball's repeated cries, his 4 limbs were grabbed and lifted into the air. One of them shouted, "Hang him on the tree over there." His suggestion was immediately rejected. "Just throw him into the river over there." The official website didn't say whether he would be protected by PK if he fell into the river. Fireball was anxious and struggled desperately. But he was a mage. Even if he was a warrior, he wouldn't have a chance in this situation. Fireball was like an offering prepared for the gods in an ancient tribe. He was raised high into the sky. He looked around and saw Gu Fei. He immediately shouted, "Aya, who's that? Save me." Gu Fei nodded and rushed forward. He stopped in front of the crowd and said, "Everyone, let's talk slowly. Put him down first. Or you, move aside." The crowd glanced at Gu Fei. They didn't care about him at all. The game had only been open for a day. No matter how professional a player was, they couldn't fight a group of people alone. Moreover, this guy was just a mage. "He's my friend. Put me down." Fireball continued to shout, "Friend? Then throw him into the river." One person waved his arm and several people rushed towards Gu Fei. Gu Fei was stunned. It wasn't just Fireball that was protected by PK. These people were fighting for the lowest level monsters outside the city gate. Obviously, they weren't level 10. There was no pain when fighting under the protection of PK. If he really let this group of people get close, he would definitely be captured. He wouldn't be able to escape. Thinking of this, Gu Fei quickly took a step forward and jumped. He turned his body sideways and turned around. His left leg brought his whole body from right to left in an arc poo. Poo, poo. 3 consecutive sounds rang out. The 3 fellows at the very front were swept away by Gu Fei's kick in the air. The 3 people sat side by side on the ground. They looked at each other and didn't know what to do. Although they didn't feel any pain, they could still feel it. It felt like someone had lightly brushed their face, but the force was so great that they couldn't resist it. This terrifying supernatural event caused by the system was even more frightening than pain. The 3 people sat there dumbly, not daring to move. The others saw it more clearly than the three people involved. Gu Fei's clean and efficient kick in the air left everyone scratching their heads in confusion. What skill is that? They asked each other. Do you know this skill? Someone asked the mage in the group. No, there's no such skill. I don't either. All the players in the group, including players of different professions, checked their skill panels. They didn't find any skills like roundhouse kick or whirlwind kick. What class is this guy? They began to doubt the mage robe in front of them. In a holographic game, equipment was not limited by professions. Wearing a mage robe to hide his identity was very reasonable. Hidden profession? Someone began to fantasize. Everyone stared at Gu Fei. Fireball, who was held in the air, didn't see the kick. He only felt that the surroundings had become very quiet. The guy who was carrying him had become a statue, holding him firmly in the air. What are you doing? Put me down. Fireball roared. His voice jolted everyone out of their daze, and they loosened their grip without a second thought. Fireball fell and stuck to the ground. He took the time to curse, "Fuck?" Gu Fei ignored them and walked into the crowd. He pulled Fireball up and left. The group looked at each other, but no one dared to stop him. Chapter 6. Where are we going? Fireball couldn't help but ask as they were getting further and further away from Cloud City and the beginner's training area. There are so many people there that we can't train. I'll take you somewhere. Gu Fei said. Where? Fireball looked around. They were surrounded by rolling hills, which were obviously different from the terrain outside of the city. In the game, this meant that they were in a new training area. Gu Fei didn't answer and led him up the hill. He pointed at the small pond at the bottom of the hill and said, "Look, there." But when he turned around, Fireball was nowhere to be seen. Then he heard Fireball's voice from his feet. "Fuck. Get down, you don't want to live anymore? We're going to be seen." Fireball was already lying on the hill. He buried his head in the grass and crawled backward. He was still talking to Gu Fei in a low voice. "What are you doing?" Gu Fei was annoyed and amused at the same time. "That's a tramp. Do you know what level that monster is? I can't believe you brought me here. I'll go back to the outside of the city and steal monsters." Fireball said as he crawled back half a meter before he dared to raise his head to speak. "What's the big deal? Just watch." Gu Fei smiled and lifted his robe with one hand. "What are you doing?" Fireball was shocked, but then he saw Gu Fei pull out a dagger from under his robe. You're a rogue?" Fireball was stunned. "Fireball!" Gu Fei yelled. Fireball answered. At the same time, he saw a fireball burning in front of Gu Fei. Equipment couldn't prove his identity, but skills couldn't be faked. There was no doubt that Gu Fei was a mage. "He's a mage." Fireball nodded. "Then why are you holding a dagger?" "To kill monsters," Gu Fei said as he ran down the hill. "Hey, you're crazy!" Fireball yelled and crawled forward half a meter. When he looked up, he saw that Gu Fei was already halfway down the hill. "What a fast mage!" Fireball shouted. At this time, Gu Fei had already run into the vision of the 6 NPCs. The 6 stood up and surrounded Gu Fei. "He's dead meat. He's dead for sure. This guy's too weak," Fireball muttered. They were surrounded by 6 NPCs. Not to mention the fact that they were still a level lower. Even if their levels weren't too low, these small monsters that lived in groups and knew how to help each other weren't something that a single person could solo. Fireball did not dare to blink. He felt that in the blink of an eye, Gu Fei might turn into a white light. However, an incredible scene happened in front of Fireball. In the next moment, Gu Fei's figure nimbly weaved through the 6 NPCs, the dagger in his hand flying left and right. From time to time, blood would fly into the air as the NPCs screamed in pain. Fireball had already lost the ability to blink. It opened its mouth wide and gasped for air. Who is this person? 6 monsters around level 20 were suppressed by him, all of their attacks missing. No, it didn't seem like all of them missed. He dodged them himself. What level was this person? Level 40? Level 50? But the game had only been open for a day. How could he have such a high level? Even if he had such a high level, Would there be a mage who would go up and fight in melee? Was this a hidden account? A hidden profession? The legendary game balance breaker? As Fireball began to fantasize, Gu Fei really did turn into a white light in his eyes. The white light of leveling up. The 6 monsters had already been taken down by him. Because his speed had increased a lot, and he also had a meat cutter as a weapon, Gu Fei's efficiency had increased by a lot. Fireball climbed up from the ground and waved at Gu Fei. Gu Fei first looted a few NPCs before walking towards Fireball with a nonchalant smile. In his opinion, killing these 6 inflexible NPCs was too easy. Big brother, what level are you? Fireball's face was full of admiration. Gu Fei first looked at his own information, then raised his head and replied, Level 10. What? Level 10? Fireball, who had just stood up not long ago, sat back down on the ground. Do you know what level they are? Fireball pointed at the 6 NPCs' corpses. I've seen it on the website. Around level 20. Gu Fei said. Level 10 killing monsters around level 20, and 1 person killing 6. Fireball nodded as if trying to convince himself, even though he had just seen it with his own eyes. So what? If you can kill them, then kill them. Gu Fei didn't care. Fireball could only stare with his mouth wide open. He was speechless. What was this? Was this a maneuver? But how could there be any maneuvers in a holographic game? I know Kung Fu. Gu Fei laughed. Damn, you can use Kung Fu to play online games? Fireball muttered. Before Gu Fei could reply, he heard a shout from the other side of the hill. Found it, over here. Looking towards the direction of the voice, they saw a person standing on the right side of the hill. He was gesturing towards the 2 as he turned around and shouted down the hill. The 2 stood up and looked down the hill. From all directions, players were running over in groups of 2s and 3s. When they gathered together, there were at least a dozen of them. What's going on? What's going on? Fireball asked as he looked around. Is there a boss? He looked around, but other than the 6 monsters that had just fallen, there were no other NPCs. They're coming for us. Gu Fei said. How do you know? Fireball asked. There's a murderous aura. Gu Fei said. Big bro, keep messing with me. Fireball rolled his eyes. But Gu Fei's guess was right. A group of people gradually gathered at the bottom of the hill and aggressively approached the 2. Look, I told you they're coming for us. Gu Fei said as he pointed at a guy in front of him. Fireball squinted and recognized that it was the group of overpowered players that had argued with him before. Damn, is it worth it? It's just a pig. There's no need to mobilize so many people. Fireball scolded. Then, he looked like a dead pig that wasn't afraid of boiling water. I'm level 1 anyways. Don't you see the pond over there? Gu Fei pointed down the hill. Fireball remembered that the other side shouted that they were going to throw him into the river. His face instantly paled and he immediately prepared for the worst. Is the pond deep? I don't know. Gu Fei shook his head. At this time, the crowd had already arrived in front of the 2. Gu Fei never thought about escaping. Fireball thought that he was level 1, so he didn't plan on escaping either. But after hearing Gu Fei's reminder to pay attention to the pond, he began to regret his decision. The 2 sides met. The other side stood in a fan shape and surrounded the 2. There were at least 50 to 60 people. Gu Fei let out a long sigh. He only knew Kung Fu, he wasn't Superman. 1 against 60? Even if his Kung Fu allowed it, his stamina wouldn't allow it. However, whether or not they would fight was another matter. Looking at the other side's gaze, there was a bit of fear. What's the matter? Gu Fei asked. Guild leader, that's him. A person pointed at Gu Fei. Gu Fei immediately looked at the guy that the person called the guild leader. He was a skinny young man. He wasn't tall, but his hair was straight, stretching his face and height. The skin on his face was rough and bumpy like orange peels. His 2 small eyes looked around at Gu Fei. Based on his behavior, Gu Fei thought that his class was a thief. The person looked at Gu Fei for a while and smiled. Hello, I'm the guild leader of the Defiant Guild. Hello. Gu Fei didn't bat an eyelid. We came from the infernal realm to the parallel world together, the guild leader said. Gu Fei nodded. He was also a young man, so he wasn't completely clueless about online games. In particular, he often heard about the Infernal Realm. Before the Parallel World, the Infernal Realm was probably the most popular online game. In the school where Gu Fei taught, this game was seen as the #1 enemy by the teachers. They were afraid that their students would be taken away by it if they weren't careful. However, with the advent of holographic games, these old online games obviously had no way out. From the start of the Parallel World open beta until now, the number of online players in the Infernal Realm had hit new lows. The world was filled with people shouting that they were selling their accounts and wanted to transfer to the Parallel World. Although it was said that the Infernal Realm was also speeding up its holographic reform, no matter what, they wouldn't be able to eat the sweetest first bite of this big cake. On the other hand, Fireball knew more than Gu Fei. He had played the Infernal Realm before, so he even knew the name of the Defiant Guild. In the Infernal Realm, this was a rather tyrannical guild. It was even famous in the entire gaming world. In particular, the guild leader of the Defiant Guild, Sword Demon, had trained the Spellblade to the pinnacle of both magic and martial arts. His equipment, level, skills, and control were all top-notch. He was definitely the #1 idol in the Infernal Realm's hearts. Back when Fireball played the Infernal Realm, he had worshipped him for a while. He didn't expect to meet him under such circumstances. Looking at this wretched young man, Fireball couldn't help but ask, "You're the Sword Demon?" Gu Fei's calm reaction made the Sword Demon feel a little bored, but Fireball's reaction made him very satisfied. He nodded slightly and said, "I am. Hello." The condescension that was hidden in his easygoing manner was vividly displayed. "Fuck, why do you look like this? Are you the Sword Demon? Or am I seeing a ghost?" Fireball obviously didn't cover his mouth and stabbed the Sword Demon's sore spot. Chapter 7. Back in the Infernal Realm, the Sword Demon was really glorious. He single-handedly created the Heaven-Defying Guild, and all the players squeezed their way into it. After he announced that he wanted to fight in the Parallel World, he immediately received hundreds of responses. Everyone expressed that they were willing to follow him. Everyone built the Heaven-Defying Guild again, and he was still the boss. Who knew that in the Parallel World's holographic game, everyone's real image would be restored? The Sword Demon's overly crude image and the glorious existence in the previous online game were too big of a contrast. It was so big that most of the players in the guild couldn't accept it. Immediately, more than half of them expressed that it was better to rely on themselves. As for the few girls who used to hang around him in the guild, they only glanced at him from afar and didn't show themselves again. In the end, out of nearly 1,000 people in the guild, only about 50 people were willing to continue to follow him. The hypocrisy of the world chilled the Sword Demon, but as a top player who had created glory, he still had his strengths. The Sword Demon wasn't ready to give up. He had secretly made up his mind to create glory in the Parallel World and make the name of the Heaven-Defying Guild resound throughout the game. The first thing he had to do was to strengthen himself. But on the first day of the holographic game, the Sword Demon felt that it was disadvantageous. In this kind of simulated environment, the word manipulation was probably retired. The Sword Demon's hands, which were originally like ghosts when controlling the mouse and keyboard, were now completely useless. As a top player, the Sword Demon understood that he could only make up for this with his understanding of the game's content. Fortunately, the game was rebuilt after half a day of open beta, giving the Sword Demon a period of time to adapt to the game. Using this time, he devoted himself to studying a lot of game information and even simulated the fighting style of the characters in the game in reality. When the open beta restarted, the Sword Demon confidently re-entered the game. In less than a day, he had already risen to level 25. The hard work and sweat he had put in was unimaginable to ordinary people. The game wasn't as simple as just playing. The beginning of the game was the best time to pull apart levels. Of course, the Sword Demon would not miss it. His level was far higher than his companions, so he did not waste his time carrying others. So, when he was with the Defiant Guild outside the city, the Sword Demon was not among them. It was not until Gu Fei kicked the three of them and took away the fireball that his companions reacted and hurriedly reported to the Sword Demon. After listening to his companion's detailed description, the sword demon's heart was filled with doubts. He was already familiar with all the skills in the game. If he had to compare it, Gu Fei's kick was similar to the Grandmaster of Combat Swallow's flash. However, that was an advanced skill that could only be learned at level 54. How could anyone know it now? What's more, his companions weren't even level 10 yet. How could they use their skills on people who were supposed to be protected by PK? As a result, Sword Demon hurried back from the leveling area and brought people from the guild to search in the direction the two left. He didn't have any thoughts of revenge just because he stole a pig. He just felt that there was something about this character that he needed to understand. Unfortunately, Fireball's words hit the Sword Demon's sore spot. This was the easiest way to arouse the Sword Demon's fighting spirit, and Fireball accurately grasped it. The Sword Demon glared fiercely at Fireball and asked Gu Fei, "What level are you?" "Level 10, Gu Fei replied. "Very good." The Sword Demon nodded. "How about I fight the two of you by myself?" "Damn, I'm only level 1. "What level are you?" Fireball shouted. Gu Fei echoed Fireball and replied, "Yeah, he's only level 1. He can't PK." The Sword Demon smiled. He didn't want to PK with a level 10 player and a level 1 player. He said this to make the other party show weakness. Unexpectedly, Gu Fei added, "So I'm fine by myself?" The Sword Demon's eyes widened. He simply couldn't believe his ears. "What did you say?" "What? Don't you want to PK?" Gu Fei asked. Gu Fei's question left the Sword Demon with no room to retreat. Of course, he wasn't afraid. He just felt that it wasn't worth it. The Sword Ghost felt that it was too degrading for him to fight the first battle in the parallel world to make a name for himself in a level 10 mage. However, the Sword Demon couldn't think of any reason to refuse. He could only nod and say, "Okay, very good." He looked around. There was a large open space next to the pond at the bottom of the hill. The Sword Demon pointed there and said, "How about we go there?" This was also the first time he PK in a parallel world. He felt that finding an open and stable place was more conducive to his performance. Gu Fei didn't care at all. He nodded and walked over there. Fireball quickly followed him and whispered, "Are you crazy? You don't even know what level he is and you want to PK with him? What's wrong with that? If I can PK, then so be it." Gu Fei laughed. In the open space next to the pond, the two stood still. The Sword Demon was followed by his companions. The group was also very nervous. They trusted the Sword Demon, so they continued to follow the Sword Demon in the game. Then this time, could the Sword Demon still be as brilliant as before? Perhaps this battle would explain a lot of problems. Fireball stood behind Gu Fei, and he was absent-minded at this time. He was gauging the depth of the pond, looking for a place he could use if he fell into the pond. He felt that there was no chance of Gu Fei winning. Who was the opponent? The Sword Demon, the top player in the online gaming world. As long as he set foot in an online game, he was always at the peak of existence. Demon territory? That was just one of his many pinnacles. "Let's start," Gu Fei said as he lifted his mage robe and pulled out a dagger. Dagger? The Sword Demon was startled. This person was clearly a mage. There were some skills in the game that were popular. Once you reached the level and paid, you could learn any profession. Appraisal was one of them. It was not only used to identify equipment, but it could also be used to detect the profession and level of players and monsters. The Sword Ghost, who was very experienced in the game, had immediately learned appraise. As soon as they met, he had appraised the two players. Two mages, one level 10 and one level 1. Since the level of appraisal was not high enough, he could not identify the equipment on the characters. When Gu Fei pulled out a dagger, he was greatly surprised. "So it's a noob." The Sword Demon shook his head, feeling that it was quite a pity. The first time he fought was actually against a mage with a dagger. This was really not worthy of praise. The Sword Demon also pulled out a weapon from his waist. It was also a dagger. The Sword Demon's profession was a thief, a true expert with daggers. "Please." The Sword Demon felt that in the face of such an opponent, it was too inhumane for him to seize the initiative. "Please." Gu Fei suddenly held the dagger upside down, cupped his fists, and saluted the Sword Demon. This action stunned the sword demon. While he was still puzzled, Gu Fei had already flashed and stabbed over. So fast! The sword demon was shocked. He had already studied the game a little, and he could tell at a glance that Gu Fei's character must have added agility. Mage plus agility. With the sword demon's online gaming experience, he had seen a lot of all-agility mages. However, this kind of character that relied on high agility to bring high dodges or even misses required extremely high levels and equipment to support. It could be said that it could only be formed in a relatively late stage. Moreover, it was only in some games where the game data had been thoroughly studied by players that people would start to try this kind of point addition. However, in the parallel world, firstly, it was a new game and everything was still being explored. Secondly, this game was only limited to one account. If there was a mistake in adding points or other reasons that caused the character to be trash, there was no such thing as deleting the account and starting over. Therefore, although the sword demon was now level 25, he only added points to the number of people by 10 levels. Before figuring out a correct point addition route, he would not rashly use the points. In the eyes of the sword demon, the agile mage in front of him was an extremely rash existence. The sword demon hurriedly dodged to the side and dodged Gu Fei's stab while giving Gu Fei a confirmation. Unexpectedly, the opponent's reaction was extremely fast. This stab did not last long. Seeing the sword demon's body move, he followed up with a backhand slash. However, the sword demon, who could train his ghost-like hands, had good reflexes. He shrank his body nimbly and dodged this attack. Unexpectedly, Gu Fei's attack was not over. After the attack missed, he turned his body with his back facing the sword demon. The dagger passed from under his armpit and actually stabbed again. At this time, the sword demon was still in a half-squatting state after dodging the previous attack. When Gu Fei stabbed from behind, the dagger was actually coming towards his head. At this time, it was too late to dodge. The sword demon was completely like an ordinary person. When he was beaten, he subconsciously raised his hand to protect his face. As a result, the dagger in his hand happened to collide with Gu Fei's stab. With a crisp sound, the sword demon used the force to take a few steps back, pulling away from Gu Fei. Both of their hearts were fluctuating. Gu Fei did not expect the opponent to be able to dodge his 3 attacks. These 3 attacks were not used casually. Tai Sui, tail flipping, yaksha. This was a set of dagger moves that had been tempered thousands of times. Each move was aimed at a vital point. This was also in the game. If it was in reality, Gu Fei did not dare to use these 3 moves easily. If he was not careful, a life could be lost just like that. He thought it was foolproof, but he did not expect to fail. Although the guy in front of him had not practiced martial arts, he could see that his reaction was quite fast. In addition, he mainly added points in the game for agility, which was a more important factor. And because of his profession, it was obvious that his speed was above Gu Fei's. He made Gu Fei realize another problem. In reality, only he, a martial arts practitioner, could have such a high speed. But in the game, as long as the character added a point, everyone could have this speed, or even be faster than this. Gu Fei did not expect to encounter a situation that could not happen in reality in the game. He was very happy. Chapter 8. At this time, Sword Demon's mentality was completely different from Gu Fei's. The 3 consecutive attacks just now made him break out in a cold sweat. Especially the last one, it was a completely subconscious move to protect himself and help him block this move. The opponent was a mage and he was a thief. Originally, it should be him trying to get close to the opponent, and the opponent would keep a distance from him and attack with long-range spells. But now, it turned out that the mage was wielding a dagger toward the thief. As a result, the thief dodged 3 attacks at close range and didn't dare to come forward. No matter how rich Sword Demon's online gaming experience was, he never thought that he would experience such a scene one day. At first, he was quite worried about the mage's beginner spell, Fireball. Although the level was low, if he was really hit by the fireball, the damage would be equivalent to 2 or 3 slashes from him. In the end, the other party didn't use spells at all and just stabbed him 2 or 3 times with a knife. This was too unreliable. The two sides were in a stalemate, and no one moved forward easily. The sword ghost quickly came up with a strategy. He didn't have a long-range attack move yet. If he wanted to knock down the opponent, he had to get close. But at the thought of getting close, cold sweat appeared on Sword Demon's forehead again. Fireball? Gu Fei suddenly spoke toward the crowd, but suddenly, a fireball quickly ignited in front of him. Oh no, I was only worried about the guy's close combat ability. How could I forget that he was a mage? As soon as Sword Demon saw the fireball, he didn't wait for the opponent to release it and began to move irregularly in an S shape. He had already seen the mage cast fireball in the game. After the fireball was shot out, it would track the target in a very small range for a short time. As long as the target didn't get hit or run out of the range during this time, it would be considered a successful escape. Sword Demon twisted wildly in the open space in the crowd, waiting for Gu Fei to say shoot. Unexpectedly, Gu Fei looked at the fireball in front of him and muttered, "I'm not calling you, I'm calling that fireball." With a whoosh, the first fireball went out, but then a second one ignited. The Sword Demon twisted even more crazily. However, Gu Fei's fireball still didn't shoot out. He just stood there, not knowing what to do. After a while, the fireball extinguished itself. He had to worry about his fireballs from afar, and he couldn't gain the upper hand in close combat. How could he fight like this? There was no other way. This was the only way. Sword Demon thought that Gu Fei repeatedly ignited fireballs in order to restrict his movements. Without waiting for Gu Fei to ignite a third fireball, he also used his exclusive skill. The figure of Sword Demon gradually became thin like fog, and in the blink of an eye, he disappeared from everyone's eyes. "Hide!" Someone in the crowd shouted. Stealth was definitely a thief's trump card, so it wasn't surprising. What truly shocked everyone was that stealth was a skill that could only be learned by thieves at level 24. Although they knew that Sword Demon's level was definitely higher than theirs, they didn't expect it to be so much higher. No wonder he was the #1 player in the online gaming world. Everyone who was still worried about the Sword Demon being defeated by Gu Fei in 3 moves was full of confidence in the blink of an eye. In the online gaming world, level was the most important thing. Level 24 versus level 10. With such a huge gap, there wasn't even a need to fight. Sword Demon disappeared from everyone's eyes. He hid somewhere on the field, paying attention to Gu Fei's movements. The Sword Demon didn't use stealth right away because of the Mage's level 6 skill, Resistance Ring of Fire. The characteristic of stealth was that once he attacked or was attacked, he would immediately appear. Although the attack of Resistance Ring of Fire was small, its range was slightly longer than a full close-range attack. Therefore, thieves couldn't quietly get close when the mage used Resistance Ring of Fire. Of course, Resistance Ring of Fire also had a weakness. It had a cooldown time and a cooldown time, and the time difference between the 2 times made it impossible for the mage to ensure that he always had Resistance Ring of Fire on him. In this time difference, it was a good opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Sword Demon deduced 2 points based on his own experience. First, in a PK between beginner mages, he would open Resistance Ring of Fire right away. Second, the opponent definitely wouldn't think that he had mastered the thief's stealth skill, which was only available at level 24. Therefore, his original plan was to wait for Gu Fei to use up Resistance Ring of Fire, then he would approach with stealth and deal a fatal blow. But now it seemed that both of his deductions were wrong. Gu Fei didn't open Resistance Ring of Fire, nor did he show the slightest surprise at his stealth. In addition, this mage's close combat ability was even scarier than his thief's. This was something that Sword Demon couldn't imagine unless he experienced it himself. Forced by the situation, the Sword Ghost had no choice but to use stealth first. He believed that after seeing him use stealth, the mage would immediately open Resistance Ring of Fire no matter what. But his stealth was 3 seconds longer than Resistance Ring of Fire. He would first get close, wait for Resistance Ring of Fire to cool down, and use these 3 seconds to get close and kill the opponent. Unless the opponent's Resistance Ring of Fire had been upgraded and the time was longer than his stealth. But this possibility could be said to not exist. For a level 10 character, time and money wouldn't allow him to upgrade any of his skills. Through his understanding of the game, accurate calculations, and the development of the best battle plan, this had always been Sword Demon's style in online games. Even if the opponent was only a level 10 mage, he wouldn't underestimate him at all. Unfortunately, this time his judgment was wrong again. Gu Fei still didn't open Resistance Ring of Fire, nor did he wander around the field to avoid the invisible enemy. He still stood motionless in the same place. Could it be that he hasn't learned Resistance Ring of Fire? Or is he really a noob who can't be more noob? Sword Demon was bewildered, but the opportunity couldn't be missed. He quickly approached Gu Fei and predicted the routes that Gu Fei might choose. Gu Fei didn't move, not even a finger. Sword Demon even wondered if he had to stick in front of him and blow air on his face before he would have a little sense of crisis. In the blink of an eye, Sword Demon had arrived behind Gu Fei, but Gu Fei still didn't have any reaction. Sword Demon didn't have time to think anymore. His stealth time was about to end, and he was ready to use the strongest attack he currently had. Level 18 Thief Skill, Backstab. As the name suggested, this skill should be used behind the target, and it could cause 200% plus 40 damage under normal circumstances. Although the stealth effect would disappear the moment the skill was used, and the surrounding people's exclamations would remind Gu Fei, but by that time, his dagger would definitely have pierced into his back. With a difference of 14 levels, a thief's backstab against a mage, other than instant killing the Sword Demon, he couldn't think of any other ending. The onlookers didn't understand the changes on the field, and no one knew that at this time, Sword Demon had stuck behind Gu Fei. But at this moment, Gu Fei suddenly turned around, and his left hand quickly stretched out. The onlookers couldn't help but let out incomprehensible exclamations. But then, they saw the figure of Sword Demon suddenly emerge in the air. His outstretched right hand held the dagger tightly, but his right wrist was firmly held by Gu Fei's left hand. The scene in people's minds froze at this moment, but the field didn't stop changing. Gu Fei's left hand quickly pressed and twisted. Sword Demon's wrist was in pain, and his fingers became weak. He opened his palm, and the dagger slipped from his hand. Gu Fei bent down with his right hand, and his fingers loosened and tightened. He threw away the knife that was originally in his hand and caught Sword Demon's dagger at the same time. Then, with a pull of his left hand, Sword Demon's right arm was bent behind his back. Gu Fei had already rushed over, and with a raise of his right hand, the dagger was across the Sword Demon's neck. Gu Fei's movements were swift, and by the time the onlookers reacted, Sword Demon had already been completely restrained by Gu Fei. A knife was pressed against his neck. Even though this was an online game and no one knew if the situation posed any threat, anyone with eyes would be able to tell the difference between victory and defeat. Beautiful! Fireball suddenly spoke. Thinking that once Gu Fei was defeated, the opponent's next target would be him, he was quite frightened. At this time, seeing Gu Fei win beautifully, his spirits were lifted. He rushed out of the crowd, clapped his hands, and came in front of the two. He patted Sword Demon and said, "You're level 24, right? Defeated by a level 10 mage, do you admit defeat?" Ha! Fireball had a satisfied look on his face, as if he had defeated Sword Demon. Sword Demon's face was ashen. He admitted defeat, even hiding behind and backstabbing. This kind of opportunity was given to him, and he was still defeated. What else was there to be unhappy about? A level 25 thief could only play these few tricks. Who the hell was this guy? Looking at the skills he used, they weren't skills that came with the game at all. Admitting defeat didn't mean that he was happy about losing. Sword Demon's heart was filled with all sorts of emotions. In addition to his doubts about Gu Fei's skills, he also felt pain for himself. He thought about how he was the #1 expert in the online game, and now he was defeated by a mage 15 levels below him. Was everything he had in the past really a thing of the past? Just as he was thinking, his back suddenly loosened. Gu Fei had already let him go. Sword Demon turned around, took 2 steps back, and looked at Gu Fei. "What's your name?" "Chenli One Drunk." Gu Fei replied. "Very good. I'll come find you again," Sword Demon said. Gu Fei smiled and nodded. Sword Demon turned to leave, but Gu Fei suddenly called him back. "Wait, your dagger." Saying this, he threw the dagger at Sword Demon. Sword Demon reached out to catch it, but was startled. His dagger was called Frostbite's Memories. In addition to damage, it also had 25 points of agility, a 30% chance of a critical hit, and a 10% chance of level 3 freezing damage. Sword Demon had accidentally used the terrain in the forest to trap monsters and killed an unknown level boss that dropped it. Among the weapons announced on the official website, there wasn't a weapon with attributes that surpassed it. Sword Demon's face was ashen after losing. Half of the reason was because this dagger had fallen into Gu Fei's hands. But at this time, Gu Fei threw it back into his hands. Sword Demon held it tightly, simply not daring to believe this was real. Nowadays, the online game was filled with a large number of money warriors. This kind of top-notch item could be sold for a few months of an ordinary person's salary. But this kid in front of him, did he not understand, or what was going on? Sword Demon didn't understand and didn't know what to say. He could only nod towards Gu Fei, thank him, and turn to leave. Chapter 9. The other players of the Defiant Guild looked dispirited when they saw their guild leader lose so thoroughly. After glaring at Gu Fei and Fireball a few times, they silently left. Fireball was unforgiving, whistling and hissing at them. The online gaming expert he once worshipped now only had one word in his mind, bah. Brother Zue, Brother Zue. When the Defiant Guild members left, Fireball had already erected a new idol. How did you know he was behind you? Fireball asked. Because I have a murderous aura. Gu Fei smiled. Murderous aura? Really? Fireball muttered to himself. Of course. Gu Fei nodded. I haven't mastered murderous aura yet. My fourth uncle is the best at it. For example, if he's sleeping there and you walk around him and make a sound, he'll still be sound asleep. But as soon as you focus on him, he'll immediately wake up. You really know martial arts. Fireball said. It's not martial arts, it's kung fu. Gu Fei said. What's the difference? Martial arts is to strengthen the body. Kung fu is to defeat the enemy and protect the country. Gu Fei sighed as he spoke. This was the difference between him and Old Man. Old Man always emphasized that they practiced martial arts, but Gu Fei felt that it was clearly kung fu. Protect the country. Is there a need for that now? Fireball asked. Gu Fei smiled. That's why I'm playing online games. Oh, can I learn? Fireball perked up. Gu Fei hesitated. Is it because I'm too old? Fireball was a little disappointed. He was already in his 20s. According to some wuxia novels, the protagonist should be famous in Jianghu at this age. If he started practicing martial arts at this age, his wives would all be snatched away by the time he came out of the mountains. Unexpectedly, Gu Fei shook his head and said, Kung Fu can only be formally learned when one's body has matured, at least 15 or 16 years old. You're about the same age as me. How can you be too old? But learning martial arts takes a lot of time, at least 8 to 12 hours a day. Do you have that much free time? Nope, Fireball answered without hesitation. Or use your time in the game. No, I don't want to learn it. Let's continue the game. Fireball hurriedly interrupted. Gu Fei smiled helplessly. At this time, the 6 tramps had respawned. Gu Fei picked up the flesh-cutting knife he had dropped earlier and was about to head over to kill the enemy when Fireball said, Brother Zue, the levels of the monsters here are too high. I'm not as good as you. I'm going somewhere else to train. I'll carry you, Gu Fei said. I'm here to play games, not to ask someone to carry me. Fireball said with determination. Alright, go ahead then. Gu Fei smiled. Brother Zui, slow down. Don't leave me too far behind. Fireball waved as he ran. If you haven't logged off, let's go back to the city for a drink. Okay. Gu Fei agreed. The two then separated, and Gu Fei continued to farm monsters in the leveling area. He was very excited about the battle with the Sword Demon. It had been a long time since he had a chance to fight someone like this. The moment between victory and defeat, Gu Fei loved the feeling of that moment. Although this opponent's combat skills were quite rough, in a simulation game like the Parallel World that required combat, Sooner or later, everyone would master certain combat skills. That was when it would be really interesting. As for these NPCs in front of him, Gu Fei was bored to death as he casually flipped through the pages. A computer was a computer after all. This kind of inflexible attack method wouldn't work if it was used over and over again. Sooner or later, all players would discover the pattern of computer attacks. For example, the sword demon just now. With his intelligence and reflexes, he would eventually become an expert. At the bottom of the hill by the pond, Gu Fei farmed monsters for a full 2 hours. In his eyes, he wasn't fighting monsters, he was only practicing his kung fu. He liked the feeling of sweating like rain and fighting to his heart's content. He didn't feel that his repetitions were boring at all. The reason why he could persist when his family members gave up kung fu one after another was that Gu Fei loved kung fu and experienced endless joy from it. After killing another 6 vagrants, Gu Fei had reached level 16. He cupped the water from the pond and wiped his face. The hot sweat on his face was cooled by the cold water, and he felt extremely refreshed. For the first time, Gu Fei sincerely praised the simulation of the game. The feeling of sweat and the cold touch were amazing. At that moment, Gu Fei received a notification of a message. He opened his inbox and saw that it was indeed Fireball. Brother Zue, what level are you? Level 16, Gu Fei replied. That's fast. I've only just reached level 10. Looking at the text, Gu Fei could feel Fireball's wailing. However, he only reached level 10 after 2 hours. Thinking back, he had only fought 2 rounds by the pond. It seemed that in the parallel world, killing monsters above his level was the best way to level up quickly. Brother Zue, are you done? I've saved some money. I'll buy you a drink when we get back. Fireball sent another message. Sure. Gu Fei replied and began to clean up the 6 guys he had defeated. A small amount of money, some unknown flowers and plants, and then there were the meat knives. Gu Fei had collected more than a dozen of them, and there was no place to put them. Although it was completely simulated as a game, the character still needed a backpack to store things. In the parallel world, the backpack was designed as a pocket. The items that were picked up could be thrown into the pocket on the right side of the waist. Even if the item was placed in the backpack, it would not fall out again. When you wanted to take something, you could put your hand into the pocket and feel the neatly arranged space. Whichever compartment you put your hand into, the item in that compartment would naturally be held in your hand. When your hand was out of the pocket, the item would be taken out. It felt as magical as Doraemon. After packing up, Gu Fei climbed up the hill and looked around to determine the direction to return to Cloud City. Coincidentally, he saw a guy leveling up by the pond at the foot of the hill. Lurking behind the vagrant, he used backstab. Then, he would stab wildly at the monsters that surrounded him. After knocking one over, he would quickly run away to rest. After his HP recovered, he would repeat the same trick. The dagger in this person's hand emitted a faint blue light. Gu Fei smiled. He recognized this person as Sword Demon. He seemed to be around level 20, so it was suitable for him to fight monsters and level up here. However, a group of 6 vagrants was not suitable for players to fight alone. Besides Gu Fei's abnormal skills, only players like Sword Demon who were good at calculation could deal with it. There should have been 6 vagrants around the fire, but there were only 3. When the 4th one refreshed, Sword Demon would immediately go forward. Lurking, approaching, backstab, forcefully attack, retreat, rest, wait for the refresh, and then go again. Sword Demon's attack method was the same as Gu Fei's. It was also a repetitive routine designed for the characteristics of NPCs. Gu Fei couldn't help but let out a sigh of admiration in his heart. However, Gu Fei immediately discovered that on a hillside not far from him, there was another person watching Sword Demon's performance. This person was wearing a close-fitting purple robe, showing off her figure. It was obvious that she was a female player. From the side, Gu Fei couldn't see her face clearly. He only saw that she held her left arm with her right hand and put 2 fingers on her left hand, gently on her lips. She was very focused on Sword Demon at the foot of the hill. He didn't expect a girl to know what was good for her. Gu Fei smiled. At this time, Sword Demon had just cleaned up another vagrant and retreated to a rest area. He touched his pocket and seemed to find that his backpack was full. He let out a long breath and looked up. He then found two people looking at him from the hillside. After a moment of shock, he turned around and left. I wonder if he recognizes me at this distance. Gu Fei thought to himself that he didn't have the special iconic equipment like Sword Demon's frostbite memories. The two people who had lost their target immediately chose their own directions and left. Gu Fei noticed that the girl was walking in the same direction as Sword Demon and laughed in his heart. Could it be that this Sword Demon is going to have an affair? Although he was curious, he immediately gave up the idea of following them when he thought that Fireball was still waiting for him in the city bar. Chapter 10. On the way back to Cloud City, there were more and more players. It could be seen that most of the players weren't focused on leveling up. They were still experiencing the novelty of a holographic simulation game. The two of them stood together, shook hands, and patted each other's shoulders. Both of them felt extremely fresh. Gu Fei returned to Cloud City, asked Fireball for directions to the tavern, and walked toward the plaza of Cloud City. Tavern, auction house, bank. Three important buildings were located in three directions of the plaza. Gu Fei stepped forward and pushed open the door of the tavern. The light in the room wasn't as dim as Gu Fei's, but a soft and natural warm color. There were many players in the tavern, but they were all in high spirits. Those who came to get drunk after being sad didn't show up for now. The wooden shelves of the bar were piled with a dazzling array of bottles. The NPC in charge of serving completely ignored the attitude of the guests and greeted everyone with a gentle smile. Gu Fei looked around, but his eyes weren't as sharp as Fireball's. Fireball shouted from the table in the corner, Brother Zue, here? Hey Fireball. Gu Fei waved at him. With a sudden sound, a fireball burned in front of him. The surrounding players were momentarily stunned. However, when they realized what was going on, they burst into laughter. Gu Fei helplessly waited for the fireball to disappear before coming to the table. Fireball's face was gloomy, and he cursed at his friend who gave him this name. Gu Fei continued to look around as he listened to him mumbling to himself. Hey, isn't that? Gu Fei suddenly saw someone. Fireball glanced back and laughed. Sword Demon, right? He just came in not long ago. This guy took a detour and came back before me, Gu Fei said. But Fireball didn't understand. He was just leveling up there. I saw him, Gu Fei said. Oh, his level is about the same, Fireball said as he poured Gu Fei a glass of wine. Come, Brother Zue, try this wine. Judging from your name, you must like to drink, right? Gu Fei smiled bitterly. Have you forgotten? My name is the same as yours, it was given by someone else. I forgot. Fireball slapped its head. If I had known, I wouldn't have invited you to drink. It cost me a silver coin. Fireball lamented. 1 silver coin was equivalent to 100 copper coins. In the early stages of the game, one could buy a basic weapon from a blacksmith. It would take a lot of time to accumulate silver coins by killing monsters. It's alright, count it on me. Gu Fei smiled. The monsters he killed were of a much higher level than the ones he killed in Fireball. Naturally, his income was much higher as well. At this time, Sword Demon also noticed Gu Fei sitting here. Their eyes met and Sword Demon nodded to Gu Fei as a greeting. The tavern continued to bustle with activity. Suddenly, the door was pushed open with a squeak, and the entire tavern instantly fell into silence. The remaining sounds were all made by people with their backs to the door, such as Gu Fei. Gu Fei looked back under everyone's burning gaze and saw a girl. The purple robe was a little familiar, but Gu Fei was not sure if it was the one he saw on the hillside. On the way back to the city, he had seen many similar clothes, which were obviously basic equipment for a certain profession. The equipment in the game would automatically become the most suitable state, so everyone's figure would be appropriately set off. The girl in front of him had a well-proportioned and slender figure. All the parts that should have curves were perfectly curved, and there was not a trace of excess fat on her body. No wonder everyone in the tavern was dumbfounded. Such a figure was flawless. In contrast, the girl's appearance was not as stunning as her figure, but it was still a very outstanding face. Her watery eyes were captivating, and the slight smile on the corner of her mouth was very amiable. With a smile, the girl nodded slightly at the people in the tavern. Only then did everyone return to normal, and the scene could be described as an uproar. Originally, he had been staring at the girl naked and burning with desire, but now he had to put on a sanctimonious appearance. If he wanted to peek, he had to peek. There were actually many people in the tavern, and there were no empty tables at this time. There were only 1 or 2 seats at each table. The male players at the table were all excited, but no one dared to invite her. The bird that pokes its head out will be shot, and anyone who dared to speak out would be the public enemy of the people. Even if they had a chance to taste her beauty up close, there was no guarantee that they would be tied up and thrown into the moat when they went out. In order to build a harmonious society, everyone quietly waited for the beautiful girl to make her own choice. The girl walked over with small steps, and Fireball also seemed very excited. Fireball and Goofei's table was for 4, and now there were only 2 people sitting. It could be said that the situation was very good. But the girl's eyes only swept past every empty seat, and in the blink of an eye, she had already swept past Goofei and Fireball. Fireball looked up and missed. Finally, he sniffed and said, "Wow, it smells good. It's a game. How can there be a perfume smell?" Goofei despised him. "It's body fragrance." "The game simulates body fragrance," Fireball insisted. Goofei smiled and couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him. At this time, the girl had already walked through most of the tavern. Seeing that there were no seats, she seemed to be going out through another door. Suddenly, the girl stopped next to Sword Demon. Sword Demon was sitting at a table for 2. He was the only one, and there was an empty seat. Everyone held their breath. Most of them were still puzzled. This girl has such a special taste. In terms of appearance, the guy she had chosen was the ugliest in the entire tavern, right? Although Sword Demon was a top online expert, he was just an ordinary man in this aspect. At this time, when he saw the beautiful girl stop next to him, his heart surged a little. Unexpectedly, the girl didn't sit down. She just gently raised her right hand and patted Sword Demon's back. The crowd continued to be silent. These 2 people know each other? Everyone was thinking. Beauty and the Beast. This was what most of the people thought, and a small part of them thought that a flower was stuck in cow dung. Sword Demon was flattered. Of course, he knew that he didn't know this girl at all. He raised his head and was about to speak when he saw the girl smile at him and then point at his feet. "Your money fell." Everyone, including the Sword Ghost, lowered their heads and looked down. A glittering gold coin fell at Sword Demon's feet. "Oh, thank you." Sword Demon subconsciously bent down to pick it up, thinking that he could use this as an excuse to buy the girl a drink. "You're welcome." Sword Demon heard the girl's reply. When he picked up the money, the girl had already walked to the door. She looked back at him with a smile and floated away. Sword Ghost was in a daze. He gripped the coins so tightly that he was about to unleash his diamond finger. Good figure, beautiful face, and such a nice voice. I think I've fallen in love with her." Fireball murmured. "Brother Zui, ah?" When Fireball waited for the girl to leave the tavern and turned to speak to Goofei, he found that Goofei had already stood up and quickly chased after her. "You really are my idol." Fireball was dumbfounded as he watched Goofei rush out of the tavern. Goofei rushed out of the tavern and looked around. He only saw that the girl had turned into an alley on the right, so he quickly chased after her. Sword Demon, this idiot. Goofei cursed in his heart. Still trying to pick up the gold coin, didn't you notice that the frostbite memories you left on the table had already been taken away? No one would have thought that such a girl would do such a thing. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, Goofei would not have believed it either. How despicable! Goofei clenched his teeth. This incident brought back the shadow of his childhood. At that time, practicing martial arts consumed a lot of energy every day. Goofei followed the principle of eating less and eating more. Every time he added more food, the unlucky child from his second uncle's house would always appear. "Hey, little Fei, Why did you eat on the ground again? Pick it up quickly, or third uncle will beat you up again if he sees it. Little Gu Fei hurriedly crawled to the ground to pick it up. When he climbed back onto the table, his delicious food had already disappeared along with the unlucky child. In addition, there were endless tricks such as, there's a UFO, your dad is looking for you, the black cat sheriff is starting, and so on. In the end, Gu Fei hated this kind of deception that snatched food from the tiger's mouth. Unfortunately, when he made up his mind to be teased again and beat up the child from his second uncle's house, the child was already tired of eating Gu Fei's extra food and disdained to play these tricks. How many years had it been? When Gu Fei thought of this matter, he had a feeling of injustice waiting to be avenged. Today, he finally encountered it. Unfortunately, the other party was a girl. He still had to consider how to do it. While Gu Fei was pondering, he had already caught up to the alley. He turned around and pressed the tip of his nose against the tip of his nose. It's quite fragrant. This was Gu Fei's first thought. When he reacted, he quickly took a step back and saw that the girl was looking at him with seductive eyes. Why are you following me? Hand over the thing. Gu Fei didn't give her a good look. Although his face was still a little hot from the close contact just now and he had the urge to do it again. What thing? The girl was obviously playing dumb. Playing dumb? It's the dagger you just took from the tavern. Frostbite's memory. Gu Fei said. The girl was stunned. She wasn't playing dumb. She just saw that the person chasing her was not the owner of the lost item. She really didn't expect that he would come for the lost item. She thought it was some boring person who wanted to communicate with her because of her beauty. She was quite confident in her own beauty and looks. Chapter 11. Hurry up and take it out. Gu Fei reached out his hand. Why should I give it to you? The girl said. Gu Fei frowned. Could it be that he had to earnestly say to the other party, stealing is not good, stealing is not good, stealing is not good, return it to the owner, okay? Of course, he had said similar teaching words before. Don't forget, he was a teacher. But the girl in front of him was about the same age as him. After seeing her skilled and calm techniques, Gu Fei suspected that she might be a professional. Trying to reason with this kind of person, wasn't that nonsense? Since he couldn't reason with her, he could only talk with his fists. Gu Fei had been influenced by his father since he was young. In fact, most of his character was the same as his father, except for their differences in the purpose of learning Kung Fu. Gu Fei clenched his fist. The girl's face changed. What are you doing? Do you want to hit me? Or hit a woman? You can't be that wretched. You don't want to get hit? Then give it to me, or I promise you won't be a beauty anymore. Gu Fei said. The girl's face was filled with fear. After a while, she gritted her teeth and said, Okay, I'm unlucky. Here you go. She put her hand into her pocket and pulled out a dagger. She threw it at Gu Fei. If he was stabbed, Gu Fei wouldn't have the face to say he knew Kung Fu. He reached out and caught the dagger. Just as he was about to say a few words, the girl had already turned around and started running. Not good. Gu Fei cried in his heart. What was that thing in his hand? It wasn't Frostbite's memory. He had been tricked. Gu Fei chased after her. He thought he could catch up to a weak girl in a few steps, but Gu Fei found that he was wrong and very wrong. This parallel world was said to be completely realistic, but it ignored the most basic problem, the difference between men and women. The difference between men and women in this virtual game was the same as in the old online games. It was in the words male and female. Other than that, there was no difference. The official website had once criticized male players for sexually assaulting female players and made major changes to the issue, but in reality, the deciding factor was actually the class. You, a male mage, want to have improper thoughts about a female warrior? His head would definitely be twisted off, no matter how high his level was. If he wanted to do something bad, he had to get close, right? From a distance of 3 to 5 meters, even if you cast the ultimate spell Cloud Explosion, it wouldn't be considered sexual harassment, right? The issue of men and women was really a bug. Gu Fei thought angrily. Take this lady in front of him, for example. When she ran, there was only one word that could describe her: fast. It was a waste of Gu Fei's LV-16 upgrade points to increase his agility. However, the girl in front of him was clearly a true profession that could utilize agility. The distance between them grew larger and larger. She even had the time to turn around and make a few faces at Gu Fei. Gu Fei was angry, but it was useless. There was no such thing as unlocking potential in the game. If you work hard, you can easily reach your maximum value, but after that, it will be impossible for you to break through even a little bit. Idiot, come and chase me. Once you turn this corner, you won't be able to see me anymore. Seeing that the distance between them was long enough, the girl actually stopped at the intersection and turned around to yell at Gu Fei. Don't run if you dare. Gu Fei used the most primitive method of provoking her. But according to the research of experts, women were naturally resistant to provocation, and Gu Fei's provocation was like a stone sinking into the ocean. The girl acted as if she didn't hear him and blew an affectionate kiss at Gu Fei. I'm not going to play with you anymore, little mage. I'm leaving. The girl was done playing and was about to leave, but Gu Fei was completely enraged. Go to hell. With an angry roar, the knife in his hand flew out like a meteor. When it came to throwing knives, the most vivid one was the little flying knife. The little flying dagger was fast, but what was more terrifying was its accuracy. The little flying knife never missed. That was its accuracy. In an online game, it could ignore dodging and hit 100% of the time. Of course, the reason why it was so accurate was because it was fast. Because it was fast, no one could dodge it. Because the little flying knife was aimed at top-notch experts, all of whom moved like cunning rabbits. It was said that in the blink of an eye, they could disappear in front of your eyes. Of course, you had to be fast to shoot them. But for Gu Fei, he wanted to shoot a girl who had just turned around and was about to run. She didn't have the awareness or skill to dodge the little flying knife. To shoot her, he just needed to be accurate. Gu Fei was able to throw a stone into someone's eye, so his accuracy didn't need to be said. When the knife flew out, there was a shiot sound. The girl's leg was hit, and she fell to the ground. Gu Fei was overjoyed and rushed over as fast as he could. The girl was already crying so hard that she didn't look human. The most difficult thing to bear was a beauty's tears. At this moment, Gu Fei looked at the blood on the ground and felt that he had gone too far. Although this was a game, and although this knife didn't hurt a real person, it would really hurt. Gu Fei guessed it. He hadn't suffered such a heavy knife before, and the knife seemed to be quite deep. This is too much. The girl was lying on the ground. When she saw Gu Fei coming over, she cried and pointed at Gu Fei. Gu Fei felt a little guilty, but when he thought that this was a criminal, he must be as cold as winter to the enemy. His face immediately turned livid. He reached into his pocket and took out a big bundle of knives. He shouted, "If you curse again, I will stab all of these into your body." The girl immediately shut up. She had already been stabbed once. She didn't dare to doubt that Gu Fei would stab all of these knives into her body. Of course, Gu Fei was just scaring her. He already regretted the knife just now. How could he stab so many more? The girl was lying on the ground on her side. Her hand was dragging her injured leg. She didn't dare to speak anymore and just kept crying. Gu Fei touched the dagger in her leg with his hand. What are you doing? Pervert! He touched the wound and there was another burst of heart-wrenching pain. The girl fearlessly cursed again. Pull it out. It's quite ugly to have a knife in your leg. Gu Fei said, If I pull it out, it won't hurt? The girl's question was very silly and naive. If it was a real situation, when a knife stabbed a non-vital part, as long as there wasn't too much bleeding, the person's life wouldn't be in danger. Therefore, at this time, the knife shouldn't be easily pulled out. It would only speed up the blood loss. But Gu Fei was just playing a game. What if the knife was pulled out and everything would be fine? So he nodded to the girl and said, If I pull it out, it won't hurt. Then pull it out. The girl clenched her teeth. Okay. Gu Fei replied. He didn't give her any time to prepare. He raised his hand and pulled out the knife. The girl screamed. The pain was still there and blood was still flowing. As it turned out, the game was really realistic. My health is dropping, the girl suddenly said. Not good. Gu Fei was also anxious. Quick, do you have a cloth? It's best if you have a bandage. The girl actually handed him a bandage. Gu Fei took it and looked at it. It was an item in the game called a hemostatic bandage. He tore it off and quickly wrapped it around the girl's leg. The blood stopped flowing in an instant. Gu Fei didn't know if the simple hemostatic bandage he learned was effective or if the item in the game was effective. Is your health still dropping? Gu Fei asked. It's not dropping anymore. The girl replied. That was close. Gu Fei let out a long breath. If her health dropped to 0, the girl would return to the respawn point. Where would he find her? Her injury was stabilized. The girl's crying became quieter and quieter. Finally, she only sobbed and glared fiercely at Gu Fei from time to time. Gu Fei felt that his apologetic feelings were almost gone. He stretched out his hand towards the girl and said, "Okay, give me back my frostbite memory." Although the girl's pocket was very close and Gu Fei could reach out and touch it, Gu Fei knew that the pocket was a treasure bowl to the owner. To an outsider, it was just a pocket. If he reached out his hand, the only thing he would find in the pocket was his hand. The girl didn't seem to be in so much pain anymore. She regained some of her energy. I'll give it back to you. Is it yours? Gu Fei said. Then why should I give it to you? It's my friend's. Gu Fei said. Friend? The girl giggled. How come your friend isn't sitting at the same table? Don't think I didn't notice you. You're sitting at the same table with that lecherous guy. You're definitely not a good person. Gu Fei raised Fireball. At that time, Fireball's eyes were very hot and bold. To put it in an ugly way, it was lecherous. You're stealing someone's things. What kind of good thing are you? Gu Fei said. I didn't say I was. The girl laughed. Hurry up and hand it over. Gu Fei said fiercely. Not giving. Then I'll stab it again. Gu Fei picked up the dagger that he had just pulled out from the girl's leg. Oh, if you want to stab it, then stab it. The girl's mesmerizing eyes and the smile on her face appeared again. This damned girl. She actually saw through me. Gu Fei was depressed. In this situation, he really couldn't stab it. Actually, I know why you're here. The girl said. What did you say? Back in the leveling area, didn't you already have your eyes on the thing in his hand on the hillside? The girl said. The girl on the hillside was indeed the one in front of him. Gu Fei understood. This girl had already noticed the dagger in Sword Demon's hand. She followed him all the way to the tavern and then easily took it in front of everyone's eyes. This thing is currently a rare top-quality equipment. This game is so popular. If we post this dagger online, there will definitely be a lot of people who want it. When we sell it for a good price, we'll split it half. Is that okay? Now you don't want me to return the dagger? The girl said. Gu Fei let out a syllable that he thought best expressed his disdain. I don't want money. I just want to take it back to my friend. Don't measure the heart of a gentleman with your own mean measure. Hey, can you stop pretending? You're a man, why aren't you as honest as a girl like me? The girl said. I'm very honest. Gu Fei said indifferently. Give it to me and I won't make things difficult for you. I advise you not to do this kind of thing in the future. Oh? The girl's eyes moved. So you're saying that you're really a good person? Of course. Okay, good person, please send me to the medic. Do you really think this knife wound will be healed with a bandage? Send me there and I'll return it to you. The girl said. Chapter 12. Gu Fei glared at the girl, and the girl stared back at him unceremoniously. This kind of scene was called looking into each other's eyes. This kind of mentality was called having ulterior motives. Seeing that Gu Fei didn't react for a moment, the girl was about to say something when Gu Fei suddenly nodded. Okay, I'll take you there. The girl smiled, raised an arm, and reached out to Gu Fei. Sorry to trouble you. You're welcome. Gu Fei also smiled. He reached out to grab the girl's arm and pulled with all his might. The girl's entire body pressed against him. Just when the girl thought that Gu Fei had some ulterior motives, Gu Fei bent his legs and bent his waist. His shoulder pressed against the girl's waist, and then he straightened his body and carried her on his shoulder. So heavy. These were the first words Gu Fei said when he carried the other party. This girl had a slim figure, so she definitely wouldn't be heavy. The problem was Gu Fei. As a sorcerer, although he had already added level 16 points, he was only an agile sorcerer. His strength was still as weak as when he had first been born. It was indeed too much for him to do the physical work of carrying someone. Gu Fei sighed. If it were his real self, such a girl would be too light to carry in his hand, let alone carry her. Gu Fei complained in his heart that she was too heavy, but the girl didn't feel good either. The abdomen was a very soft part of the human body, and it bore the weight of the entire body. Anyone who had received this kind of treatment knew that it didn't feel good. What's more, the sorcerer who was carrying her obviously didn't have enough strength. He staggered as he walked. It was too dangerous. However, the medic wasn't far from here. The girl gritted her teeth and didn't make a sound. Once she showed weakness, the other party was likely to reply, "What? Want to come down? Hand over Frostbite's memories first." Of course, she wouldn't want to, so the girl didn't want to cause trouble. She would just bear with it. The girl was right. Gu Fei had wanted to torture her like this. "Blue Jean? We can take the long way around." But now, Gu Fei was almost crushed as soon as he came up. He only regretted his lack of judgment of the game. Not to mention taking a long detour, he couldn't wait to reach the finish line. There was a specialized support class in the game, Cleric. He was just one of the support skills. This healer NPC specialized in providing free medical treatment to new players in the game. It was located not far from the Priest Academy. Beginner players were very poor. Their low levels also meant that not many of them possessed healing abilities. Hence, when players suffered grievous injuries, they could only choose to rush back to the city's healers for treatment. The so-called heavy injuries here did not refer to the HP drop from normal battles. Those were only minor injuries. As long as he left the battlefield and rested for a while, his injuries and HP would recover. On the other hand, a heavy injury would not only reduce one's HP, but also their maximum HP. In such a situation, even if they sat down and rested, it would be impossible for them to recover. More importantly, the pain of this injury would always be with you, which was something the players could not bear. This directly caused the area around the healer to be filled with injuries and pain, blood and tears. It would not be an exaggeration to say that there were wails everywhere. In such a place, when Gu Fei carried the girl out of the alley, it did not attract anyone's attention. This scene was too common. Half of the heavily injured players who came here to heal were carried back. After finally finding a place to rest, Gu Fei looked forward. The bustling crowd was even livelier than the broom sellers in the Mage Academy. He immediately turned back and said to the girl, "We're here. You can line up here. Frostbite, give me back my memories." "So many people are looking at me," said the girl, blinking. Beautiful women would always attract attention wherever they went. Although everyone here was grimacing in pain and no longer had the mood to have any improper thoughts, they could still use the appreciation of beautiful women to divert their attention and reduce the pain. This was a method used by Guan Yu during the Three Kingdoms period. Although people were more elegant when it came to playing chess, appreciating beautiful women was also an art. Gu Fei was not moved at all. He opened his palm and said coldly, "Give it to me. There are really people looking at me. Look over there." The girl was very anxious and raised her voice, shouting as she pointed somewhere. No one had been paying attention to this side, but hearing her shout, they also looked over. As a result, the eyes of the people who looked over suddenly lit up, and they quickly ran over. In this place, it wasn't easy to find a few nimble fellows like them. "It really is you." As the five approached, they quickened their pace. Before Gu Fei knew what was going on, the five were already in front of him, glaring at him. Gu Fei did not know them, and they were not glaring at Gu Fei. However, the girl's action completely diverted the attention of the five. She grabbed one of Gu Fei's arms and shook it wildly, shouting as she shook, "Ah, they found us, run." "You want to run?" The five moved quickly, and in the blink of an eye, they had surrounded him. "Damn, I've been tricked again." Gu Fei already understood that the people in front of him had also suffered at the hands of this girl. They were suffering from deep hatred and had no way to take revenge, and he had accidentally fallen into their trap, being treated as an accomplice. Everyone, don't panic. I don't know her, and I'm not familiar with her at all, Gu Fei hurriedly explained. Not familiar? Why is my dagger in your hand? One of them shouted. Dagger? Gu Fei was startled, and only then did he notice his own hand. The girl had used it to hit him, and he had used it to fly the girl's sword. After it was pulled out, he had been holding it in his hand. This dagger! Gu Fei only knew that it was not Frostbite's memories, but he did not have the time to look at it. At this time he looked, Angry Howl, attack damage higher than Frostbite's memories, damage plus 5%, attack speed plus 5%. Overall, it was not as good as Frostbite's memories, but it was still a rare item in the early stages of the game. Gu Fei understood. This dagger must have been obtained by the girl from someone else, but the worst part was that it was now in his hand. Just now, she shook his arm to make the other party pay attention to the dagger in his hand. This dagger was not as distinctive as Frostbite's memories, but as long as one looked carefully, they could still recognize it, not to mention that the other party was the owner of the dagger. He had been fooled, and there was no way he could explain himself. Quick, let's kill our way out. The girl shouted loudly, pulling Gu Fei along as she rushed forward. This became a 2-on-1 situation. The other party had more people, so of course they had to support. In the end, there was an opening on the left and right. The girl immediately shook off Gu Fei's hand, and in a flash, she had already escaped through the opening on the right. She didn't even look back as she shouted, Men on the left, women on the right, I'll see you at the same place. Gu Fei smiled bitterly. If she had told him earlier, he would have been able to escape just like her. After all, he was also good at agility. But this move of hers was obviously throwing him down as a scapegoat. What's men on the left, women on the right? It was nothing more than to make the other party believe that he was her accomplice. Looking at her agility, her leg was obviously healed. She was just using it as an excuse to lure him to this place, and then call her enemies to deal with him. This damned girl, she had really ruthlessly tricked him. The girl quickly escaped from the clinic, and went back and forth through the alleys of the city. Finally, she got rid of the two people who were chasing her from the other party. As if she had suddenly used up all her strength, the girl fell to the ground on her butt. She raised her calf that had been stabbed by Gu Fei and looked at it. Blood had already soaked through the bandage. The girl gritted her teeth and tore the bandage away from the wound. She secretly cursed the game for being so realistic in some aspects, but also so frighteningly illogical in others. He actually said that she was very heavy, that damn mage. The girl cursed in her heart. She took out a new bandage from her pocket and rewrapped the wound. If she stayed still, this bandage would also show its effects and heal the injury. But this was after all only the lowest level of bandage. The lower the level, the longer the healing time. At the clinic, the injury was far from healed. However, for the sake of this rare and exquisite dagger, enduring the pain and running this far was worth it. She really didn't expect that someone could get such a good dagger in the early stages of the game. This was much better than that howl of rage. But she also had to act quickly. This kind of equipment in the early stages of the game would only get cheaper as the game progressed. The girl thought as she stood up using the wall, and limped towards her destination. The exchange hall. Just like the auction hall, the exchange hall was also where players sold their items. But there were many differences between the two. The auction hall was where players paid a certain amount of money and marked the price of the item they wanted to sell, and the system would sell it on their behalf. Within the time set by the player, other players who had their eyes on the item would bid for it, and finally the highest bidder would get it. The real use of the exchange hall was that transactions could be conducted with real money. With the development of online games today, it was no longer news that virtual items could be sold at a shocking real money price. The game company didn't have any objections to this. But due to the variety of trading channels, the security had always been on the low side. Therefore, this time, the parallel world directly provided a trading platform for real money in the game. In the exchange hall, there were several computers. These computers could be used to directly connect to the external network through the main server of the game. This was to make it convenient for buyers to use online banking to pay cash. As for the seller, they needed to submit their items to the exhibition hall, then set their own price and provide their bank account number. Once everything was settled, the information would be transmitted to the internet. Buyers could check the information on the website, and they could also go to the exhibition hall to see the actual item. After confirming the item they wanted to buy, they could pay the purchase price through online banking and transfer the money to the system account number. Then, they could go to the exhibition hall to obtain the purchased item. The system would then transfer the purchase price to the account number provided by the seller. This was the same trading model as some trading websites, but now that the game company was in charge, the security and reliability were naturally very different. The girl came to the exchange hall, handed over Frostbite's memories to the exhibition hall, and began to set the information on the computer. After submitting her account number, she entered the final setting, price. Because the game was still in its early stages, the market and the like hadn't even sprouted yet. The girl could only judge the price based on her own experience. This Frostbite's memories was definitely the best weapon in the game at the moment. Many money warriors wouldn't reject this price. The girl thought as she entered 50,000 on the keyboard. She took a deep breath and was about to press the confirm button when a hand reached out and hit the escape button, canceling the operation just now. The girl was shocked. She turned around and saw Gu Fei's half-smiling face. "You're going to sell this for 50,000 yuan?" Gu Fei asked with concern. Chapter 13. You're here. The girl smiled warmly, as if she was welcoming her husband home from work. Gu Fei didn't move and smiled. "You ran pretty fast." As he spoke, he glanced at the girl's injured calf and quickly kicked the wound. "Is your leg healed?" The girl's heart wrenched in pain, but she didn't show it on her face. Before he could reply, he heard Gu Fei grumble, "This isn't the same as the one I used to bandage." "You're quite attentive." The girl was a little surprised. "Of course, otherwise I wouldn't have followed you before, and I wouldn't have found you again." Gu Fei smiled. The girl looked at Gu Fei without saying anything or showing any expression. No one knew what she was thinking. Gu Fei continued, "Actually, you could guess that I would know you were coming here to trade, but you didn't expect me to come so quickly, did you?" "What about them?" the girl asked. She was obviously referring to the 5 people in the healing plaza. "They left," Gu Fei said. "Why would they let you go?" The girl couldn't help but be curious. "It's simple, I returned the dagger to them." Gu Fei said. "If you returned the dagger, they would believe you?" The girl didn't think it was possible. "Of course not. But the dagger was returned to them, and they weren't my opponents in a fight. What else could they ask for?" Gu Fei asked. "They couldn't beat you?" The girl was surprised. She was also someone who knew identification. She could tell that Gu Fei was only a level 16 magician. Although he was a level 16 magician, he was still a level 16 magician. However, if Gu Fei could use a dagger like Furious Howl, he would definitely not be below level 16. Moreover, it wasn't just one person, but 5. Gu Fei didn't care and only smiled. "So you're saying that you returned the dagger to them when they couldn't do anything to you?" If her previous expression was one of surprise, then her current expression was one of utter disbelief. Although the dagger was not as good as Frostbite's memory, she estimated that it would be easy to sell for around 30,000. Who would have thought that Gu Fei would let go so easily? Could it be that his purpose of following him to the death really wasn't for the money? "What exactly do you want?" The girl couldn't help but ask. "How many times have I said it? Give me back my dagger." Gu Fei said. The girl's eyes were still filled with disbelief. "I knew that you wouldn't believe what I said. Therefore, please look." Gu Fei extended his hand and pointed to the side. A figure flashed out from behind Gu Fei. He looked rather wretched, but his eyes were very spirited as he stared at the girl. "Sword Demon? Do you believe me now?" Gu Fei smiled. "You don't have to give me the dagger. Just give it back to him." "Who is he?" "You don't need me to introduce you, do you?" The girl stared blankly at Sword Demon for a while, then finally nodded. "Okay." Back at the exhibition hall, they canceled the deposit transaction. After the girl received Frostbite's memory, she didn't even stop for a second before handing it over. But the target she handed over was Gu Fei, not Sword Demon. Gu Fei took it and handed it to Sword Demon without looking at it. Sword Demon, on the other hand, didn't show the slightest nervousness or uneasiness when Gu Fei reached out to receive Frostbite's memory. He just stared at the girl from beginning to end. The girl could imagine the anger in his heart. But this was the exchange hall. If the safe zones in the game were to be compared, the exchange hall was definitely the safest of the safest zones. In the Mage Academy, you could see thousands of people shouting "Fireball" and igniting a fireball. And here, after Gu Fei shouted "Fireball," he heard someone respond from another corner of the exhibition hall. Fireball, who was admiring the mage equipment, hurried over. "Do you have something to say to this lady?" Gu Fei asked Fireball. Fireball nodded and looked at the girl. "Miss, what's your name?" "Shi Xiaotian." The girl's face was expressionless. "What about you?" she asked. "My name is Fireball," Fireball said happily. Shi Xiaotian didn't respond, but his eyes continued to stare at Gu Fei. Gu Fei knew that this "what about you" was actually directed at him. "Qianli, drunk?" Gu Fei said with a sigh. He didn't like this name, but now he could only bear it. "Real name?" Shi Xiaotian said. Gu Fei paused but still answered, "Gu Fei." Shi Xiaotian nodded, took a few steps back, leaned against the wall, and sat on the ground. Holding his injured calf, he looked at Gu Fei and said, "Violent flight." Gu Fei was startled, but quickly replied, "Liar Sky." The atmosphere was very strange, and Sword Demon couldn't help but cough lightly. She's just a little girl, let's not argue with her, okay?" Gu Fei said to Sword Demon. "Okay." Sword Demon didn't even think and answered with one word. Gu Fei smiled. "Now that you have a dagger, are you in a hurry to level up again?" Since entering the exchange hall, Sword Demon showed a rare smile, even though it was very ugly. "I'm leaving, talk to me." With that said, he didn't look at the three and turned to leave. "Damn cool. I really can't tell, but he's quite similar to the legendary elegance in the game," Fireball said, and then added, "except for his appearance." Gu Fei sighed. "I really can't refute you on this. What about us?" Fireball looked at Gu Fei, and then at Shi Xiaotian. "I'm also going to level up," Gu Fei replied. "What about you?" Fireball didn't say anything, and its eyeballs turned to look at Shi Xiaotian, but she didn't even look at it. Fireball could only say, "I'm also going to level up." "Then let's go." Gu Fei turned around. Shi Xiaotian suddenly shouted. Fireball turned back quickly, as if he was the full agility mage. Shi Xiaotian still didn't look at him, and only looked at Gu Fei. "My leg." She pointed at her calf. Gu Fei saw blood seeping out of the bandage again, and took 2 steps closer. He sighed. "You're really heavy, I can't carry you." As he said this, he rubbed his right shoulder, the place where he had carried Shi Xiaoyan. Shi Xiaotian glared at him. Gu Fei sighed and stretched out his hand. "Bandage." Shi Xiaotian took out his pocket and handed over the bandage. Gu Fei bent down, tore off the bandage, and wrapped it up for her again. "I knew it. How could my tourniquet and bandage not work? Look, it didn't work when you wrapped it yourself." Gu Fei wrapped it up quickly and stood up. "All right, you can't bleed again, unless you do it yourself. I won't be responsible for that. Let's go." Waving at Shi Xiaotian, Gu Fei and Fireball walked out. The moment he stepped out of the trading center, Gu Fei received a system notification. "Shi Xiaotian added you as a friend." "This girl?" She said she was Shi Xiaotian, and then asked for my real name. That should be her real name, right? Everyone in the game uses fake names, but a scammer uses her real name. Is there any logic in this world? Gu Fei muttered in his heart. After exiting the exchange hall, Gu Fei's friend list still hadn't closed. "Thank you. If you didn't mention it, I wouldn't have known there was a trading center in the game." Gu Fei sent a message. "Target, Hongchen Yixiao." Did you find it in the trading center?" Hongchen Yixiao replied. "Yes, it's fine now." Gu Fei said. "Do you want to tell me the scammer's information?" Hongchen Yixiao asked. "Forget it." Gu Fei said. "Protecting a scammer? That's rare. It's a beauty, right? Hongchen Yixiao replied. She looks good. Gu Fei was honest. Hongchen Yixiao replied, let me remind you. With my many years of experience, female scammers aren't only scary, but they're also quite scary when they take revenge. Be careful. The game is so big, it'll be hard to meet one in the future. Gu Fei said. Really? Maybe. Gu Fei was still honest. She took the initiative to add him as a friend, so it was possible that she wouldn't take the initiative to find him in the future. I'm not talking to you anymore, I'm going to continue leveling. Hey, give me some information about the boss, the hidden quest, or the best equipment. Gu Fei said. Stop joking, I'm a self-disciplined gamer. Hongchen Yixiao said. Gu Fei was just joking. Of course, he didn't really want information, so he immediately replied with a smiley face and closed the message window. Fireball. Gu Fei called out, but immediately realized that he couldn't just call out this name randomly. Even so, Fireball was already rising in front of him, which made Fireball beside him unhappy. Who are you calling? A slip of the tongue. Gu Fei said, but this name is too inconvenient. We need to think of a code name. Fireball cursed the guy with the name 180 times as usual, then responded to Gu Fei's call, just call me Xiaohua. Xiaohua. Let's make do with it for now. Gu Fei said. The two talked as they walked out of the city, and Fireball suddenly remembered something. Brother Zhu, That drink just now, you said you were the one who treated me, but you suddenly ran away, and I paid for it. Fireball said. Really? Then I'll treat you next time? Gu Fei didn't care. Why do I feel like you're going to go back on your words? Fireball's sense of danger was quite strong. Why would I? Do I look like that kind of shameless person? Gu Fei said. You didn't at first, but now, the more I look at you, the more I think you are. Fireball was worried. Actually, I don't like to bully strangers. Gu Fei smiled, but I like to kill people I know. Chapter 14. In the blink of an eye, a week had passed since the Parallel World Open Beta. All the players were trying their best to adapt to the changes brought about by the new online game. As a teacher in the school, Gu Fei would hear discussions about the game everywhere. Of course, Gu Fei would not go up and discuss it with them. At Gu Fei's request, Fa did not tell anyone in the school that Gu Fei was playing the game. Actually, teachers were also people, and they were also young people. Many of them liked these video games as much as the students. However, the restriction of being a role model made them always look otherworldly in front of the students. As for the things that the students liked, they were used to showing disdain. Although Gu Fei was just an insignificant physical education teacher, he still did things according to the teacher's code of conduct. However, to the students and colleagues, the change in Gu Fei was obvious. This guy finally stopped talking about his martial arts whenever he had nothing to do. Teacher Gu Fei had finally become a normal person. This actually became a piece of news in the school. Gu Fei did not have the mood to care about this. Every day, when he had free time, he would try his best to spend it in the parallel world. He liked this virtual world, a world where he could use his martial arts as he pleased. However, Gu Fei did not forget that this was a game, after all. A game needed the support of information. Every time he leveled up, Gu Fei would go to the official website to research the information and choose the next leveling area. There were 3 requirements for Gu Fei to choose monsters: humanoid, close-range attacks, and a higher level than him. Choosing humanoid and close-range attacks were all for the sake of displaying his martial arts. Gu Fei did not play the online game for the sake of the online game, he played the online game for his martial arts. The process of leveling up, which was seen as boring by others, was seen by Gu Fei as a process of practicing martial arts. Therefore, he never felt that it was boring. Even if he had to repeat the same action 1,000 times, he could still put his heart and soul into it. As for choosing monsters with a higher level than him, this was considered from the perspective of the online game. The experience gained from the monsters in the parallel world was fixed. Of course, the higher the level, the more experience. Therefore, fighting monsters with a higher level was undoubtedly a fast way to level up. Gu Fei had the ability to do so. Of course, he would not give up so easily. However, although he had skills that ordinary people did not have, Gu Fei still had his limits when it came to fighting monsters above his level. Against monsters that were more than 20 levels above him, he either couldn't keep up with their speed or couldn't break through their defense. This situation made Gu Fei suddenly recall the scene of his father teaching him martial arts when he was young. "You are small and weak, so I don't care about your attack at all." His father, who had been punched by Gu Fei, was still laughing. Following that, he quickly slapped Gu Fei to the ground and continued to chuckle. "You saw my shoulder move, so you knew I was going to slap you. But you couldn't dodge or block it. Because your hands can't keep up with your eyes. I have to practice, I still have to practice." Gu Fei had grown up through such challenges. He missed the fun of that time. Now that he had a chance to experience this pleasure, how could he not be excited? He wanted to level up, improve himself, and challenge stronger enemies. In the game, everything was that simple. On this day, Gu Fei finally reached level 30. After every player leveled up, they would habitually look at the experience needed to level up. Gu Fei was no exception. But this glance gave him a huge shock. "Are you kidding me? Is this the experience needed to level up from level 30 to level 31? Am I level 30 or level 300? This was what Gu Fei thought. Compared to the previous time, the experience needed to level up this time was no longer 10%. Instead, it was multiplied by 10. 10 times. He had never heard of an MRPG having such a large amount of experience. At this time, in the parallel world of players, the number of level 30 players was rapidly increasing. Everyone was in a whirlpool of dumbfounded leveling up. Everyone went crazy. They treated this as a bug and reported it to the game company. At that moment, almost no one was still leveling up. The game company quickly sent out an announcement. The data was normal. It wasn't a bug. The reason why this happened was because the game company had adjusted the experience needed to level up before level 30. The cause of this adjustment was the violent incidents on the first day of the open beta. A large number of players relied on their innate physical advantage in the early game to bully the weaker class players. The game company couldn't directly intervene. All they could do was adjust the game settings and try to avoid this phenomenon. After much discussion, the final decision was to greatly reduce the experience needed for players before level 30. This would allow players to quickly reach level 30. This was the level that the game company had recognized as being balanced among the various classes. Players of any class would have the ability to protect themselves and deal with their enemies at this level. Relying on natural constitution to bully weaker players wouldn't happen after level 30. Of course, if you were an extreme noob, there was nothing they could do. But this was no longer the game company's responsibility. This was a statement that could convince the players. Many people had seen the bad things that happened in the beginning of the game, so they obviously wouldn't have any objections. After the players realized that nothing had changed, they immediately flew back into the game to continue fighting. Gu Fei didn't know any of this. After confirming that he wasn't at level 300 and that he didn't look at the experience needed to level up, Gu Fei's eyelids only twitched before returning to normal. He wanted to ask Hongchen Yixiao, but when he opened his friend list and saw that he wasn't online, he immediately gave up. Even if there was a mistake, the game company would naturally correct it. "I just have to hurry up and train." That was what Gu Fei thought. He set foot on the leveling area he needed according to the route that he had chosen long ago. Gu Fei's leveling area was a leveling area for other players' leveling areas. In fact, it was possible to fight at a higher level, but the monsters' levels were already high, and they had high HP and HP. Looking at the ratio of time to experience, leveling monsters at level 40 was the most efficient. When he unexpectedly met Sword Demon in the leveling area, Sword Demon said this theory with the tone of great minds thinking alike. Of course, Gu Fei also calculated this way. The only difference was that Sword Demon leveled up was leveling up, but every time Gu Fei leveled up, he understood it as his martial arts improving by another level. If it was purely from the perspective of an online game, Gu Fei would never have such enthusiasm. At this time, Sword Demon was already at level 35. Obviously, he reached level 30 earlier than everyone else, but he and Gu Fei belonged to the same category. Their eyelids twitched, and they were still methodically leveling up. After a few words of greeting, Gu Fei said, "I won't disturb your leveling anymore," and walked alone to another monster farming area. Neither of them mentioned forming a team to level up together. In Sword Demon's view, his own method was completely a solo leveling method. Although adding another person could increase the experience gained by both of them, compared to the time, the efficiency would decrease. On the other hand, Gu Fei had also seen through the Sword Spectre's fighting style and knew that he didn't need any help. Moreover, he was also fighting with the mentality of practicing his martial arts, so he didn't need anyone to help him. With a tacit understanding, they went their separate ways. Before separating, Gu Fei looked enviously at frostbite memories in Sword Demon's hand. As it turned out, Shi Xiaoyan's eyes were indeed sharp. The price of this dagger, Frost Memories, was probably too low even if it was 50,000. The most valuable part of this dagger was not its high damage, nor was it its critical rate, nor was it its freezing rate. Instead, it was its 25 points of additional value. Players only gave 5 points for leveling up, and this dagger was equivalent to increasing the player's level by 5 levels. For an online game where killing monsters was the fastest way to level up, there was no need to explain the value of this attribute. Even if it wasn't a weapon with such a stone hanging on my waist, I can now go to a leveling area 5 levels higher. Gu Fei thought to himself. Although he was envious, Gu Fei didn't regret returning this dagger to Sword Demon and even helping him find it after he lost it. This was a matter of principle. The two leveling areas were separated by a row of woods. They couldn't see each other and could only vaguely hear the screams of monsters on both sides. The difference was that there would be a pause on Sword Demon's side, while there would be screams on Gu Fei's side. Sword Demon needed to rest to recover his HP. In the parallel world, when the system determined the state of attacking and being attacked, there was no way to recover HP through things like drugs. Drugs could only help players quickly recover HP in peaceful mode. In battle, according to the official disclosure, only recovery skills or some special equipment could be used to recover HP. It could be said that in the parallel world, solo leveling was very hard work. Of course, Gu Fei was different. He didn't use skills and only used normal attacks, but his efficiency was stronger than Sword Demon, who used all the skills that a thief could use within level 30 to the extreme. As for the big difference in experience between the two, it was only because Gu Fei had a job. In addition, every day in reality, he also spent a lot of time practicing Kung Fu, which could not be replaced by an online game. As for Sword Demon, Gu Fei didn't know what he did. In short, as long as he was online, his name would always be on. He was probably the legendary professional player. Gu Fei practiced Kung Fu while thinking about Sword Demon. On the other side of the woods, Sword Demon was also thinking about Gu Fei. After not seeing him for a while, this guy was also level 30. Level 30 in a week, which was actually a very bad result in the eyes of Sword Demon. However, he was online for a long time every day and paid attention to Gu Fei, so he was very clear about Gu Fei's daily online time. Combined with the time, Sword Demon was only shocked. Terrifying efficiency, exceeding his own efficiency. At the same time, he was very puzzled by Gu Fei's outfit. He was a level 30 mage, so what was he wearing? He hadn't changed out of his mage robe, and there was a bulge at his waist. Could it be a dagger? He was wearing a straw hat on his head, which seemed to be equipment that only warriors would use, right? The cloth boots on his feet seemed to be used by us thieves. Oh my god! What the hell was this? Chapter 15. When Sword Demon first saw Gu Fei, he was shocked by his equipment. He was so shocked that he didn't even think of using appraisal to take a closer look. But to be honest, there was no need. Gu Fei's equipment was ordinary roadside goods. Even if it was good, it wouldn't be much better. The real best ones had to be done from the appearance, such as Frostbite's memories. Listening to the endless screams of monsters over there, Sword Demon couldn't help it anymore. How does this guy fight monsters? As a player who was already familiar with the various skills in the game, Sword Demon could roughly judge the other party's way of fighting monsters just by the sound. But at this moment, he couldn't guess Gu Fei's behavior. For a player like Sword Demon who was proficient in studying the various skills in the game, he finally couldn't help but want to see what was going on. In order to obtain first-hand information, the Sword Ghost chose to use lurking to approach them quietly. The skills in the parallel world weren't learned once and for all. They also needed to be improved with continuous practice. The improved value was called proficiency. The higher the proficiency, the better the effect of the skill. There were many ways to improve the proficiency of skills, such as daily use, rewards in some missions, or some items. Lurk was obviously one of the most important skills for thieves. A veteran player like Sword Demon knew its importance, so he had been constantly practicing and had reached a very high level. Judging from the text alone, there was no time limit for Sword Demon's lurk. As long as he didn't attack or be attacked, he could stay in lurk forever. It was definitely a necessary skill for sneak peeks. Sword Demon just lurked like this, passed through the thin forest, and finally saw Gu Fei. There was no wind at the edge of the forest, but Sword Demon clearly felt a slight chill, the kind that came from the bottom of his heart. Gu Fei's monster fighting mode completely destroyed the general knowledge he had accumulated in online games over the years. His quick and nimble steps fluttered his mage robe in the wind, and his old straw hat covered half of his face. His hand rose and fell, and the cold light flowed wantonly in the surroundings. The screams of the monsters came out one after another, and in Gu Fei's hand was a saber. The blade looked very similar to the Tang Dao. It danced quickly in Gu Fei's hands, and Sword Demon's gaming knowledge was broken down by the slash. Gu Fei's attack was beautiful, so beautiful that it was flawless. But no matter how beautiful it was still an ordinary attack. A mage wielding a sword and using normal attacks to farm monsters faster than him. Would anyone believe such a thing? Sword Demon was at a loss. However, after looking at it for a while, the Sword Demon also noticed some of the mysteries in Gu Fei's fighting. Every time he attacked with his saber, he could deal the most damage. The damage value of weapons in online games was often set in a range from minimum to maximum, and the gap was not small. The minimum and maximum were two completely different levels of damage. For a long time, choosing a weapon with the highest damage value or a small range and strong stability was a topic of endless debate. How to exert the maximum damage of a weapon was also a mystery. In the end, the argument that players could accept was to rely on luck. However, in the parallel world, which was a completely simulated MRPG, the Sword Ghost had vaguely sensed that the difference between the maximum damage and the minimum damage was no longer a matter of luck but in the hands of the players themselves. According to Sword Demon's initial estimation, the more accurate each attack and the better the strength, the higher the damage would be. This was the case with Gu Fei in front of him. Sword Demon believed that even if the damage of each of his attacks did not reach the maximum, it was probably not much different. Sword Ghost had been grinding here for a long time now. He knew very well how much HP these monsters had. Just a moment ago, he had clearly counted the number of slashes Gu Fei needed to kill a monster. With a slight calculation, he already knew how much damage Gu Fei could deal. Combined with Gu Fei's identity as a mage, he concluded that Gu Fei's slashes were aimed at the maximum damage. Control. At this moment, this word suddenly rushed into Sword Demon's mind. Who said that holographic online games didn't have control? This was control. It was more powerful than the clacking of the mouse and keyboard in ordinary online games. This kind of control that pursued the maximum damage. Yes, it was called extreme control. Sword Demon seemed to suddenly see a new world and couldn't help but be excited. At this moment, Gu Fei obviously began to fight and retreat. While slashing the monsters, he moved backward with small steps. Why, does he also want to rest? Sword Demon felt strange. He hadn't seen Gu Fei injured. Although there was also a setting for fatigue in the game, to be honest, this setting was more hindrance to the players. Imagine if it was really like the physical strength of an ordinary person. With such a high frequency of fighting, they might be exhausted in a few minutes. How could the game be played then? So although there was fatigue, in fact, the decline was quite slow. Players jokingly called it the anti-addiction system. From the opposite side, they ridiculed the game company's mentality of not wanting players to play less games. Could it be that under extreme control, fatigue decreased very quickly? Sword Demon thought to himself. If that was the case, then the gains would not make up for the losses. While his fatigue points decreased slowly, so did his recovery rate. Currently, there was no way for him to recover quickly. He could only spend time waiting. Although logging out of the game counted, in the Sword Go Sword's eyes, it was absolutely not worth it. In any case, it was obvious that Gu Fei was fighting while retreating. The monsters that he had lured were also killed one by one. The newly spawned monsters were not in his attack range, so they did not chase after him. When he retreated to the edge of the forest, he slashed down with his sword and killed the last monster. Wonderful, Sword Demon thought to himself. Just the way he had retreated was enough to be described as an extreme maneuver. But the wonderful part was yet to come. After the monster was cut down, Gu Fei held the knife in one hand and the straw hat in the other. He revealed his eyes covered by the brim of the hat and looked in the direction of Sword Demon. He smiled and said, "What's the matter?" Sword Demon turned around and didn't see anyone behind him. "Are you talking about me? You can see me?" Sword Demon's face was full of surprise. "I can't see you, but I can feel you," Gu Fei said. "How is this possible?" Sword Demon was surprised. He suddenly remembered the day when the two of them were PK and his backstab. At that time, he thought that the moment he made a move, Gu Fei noticed and quickly turned around to catch him. Combined with the current situation, did he already know that he was lurking on the side? What was this? Was this considered control? Sword Demon was at a loss. "I say, hurry up and show your true form," Gu Fei shouted. He knew of Sword Demon's existence, but he couldn't see Sword Demon. Sword Demon's voice came from the air. This scene was too strange. Sword Demon stopped lurking and his figure gradually appeared. "What's the matter?" Gu Fei asked. "I want to see how you fight monsters," Sword Demon said. "How is it?" Gu Fei laughed. "Very good." Sword Demon nodded. "My Tang Saber 9 consecutive, Tang Saber 9 consecutive?" Gu Fei nodded. What was this? Was this the name of his control? Tang Saber. 2 years ago in a wuxia online game, there seemed to be this type of equipment. It was quite low level. Sword Demon secretly pondered. His rich experience and knowledge were limited to online games. The famous Tang Saber made him think of a lowly piece of equipment. 3 forms of split flow. Gu Fei suddenly shouted. With a turn of his wrist, the saber in his hand was raised and he quickly slashed the air 3 times. 3 forms of wave breaking. As soon as he said this, his aura changed. Like a fierce tiger coming down the mountain, he slashed forward 3 times. 3 forms of blazing sun. The saber shrunk in front of him and with a shake of his arm, he slashed 3 times. 3 forms of Tang Saber 9 consecutive. To be able to flexibly use the 3 techniques of slashing, chopping, and stabbing, it would take more than 10 years of practice. What does this count as? Gu Fei laughed at himself. Sword Demon just nodded blankly. He had no idea what Gu Fei was talking about. In his eyes, Gu Fei's messy moves were far less exciting than when he fought monsters. "Oh right, why are you looking for me?" Gu Fei asked. Sword Demon really did have something, but he couldn't make up his mind. But after seeing Gu Fei's extreme operation, he finally made up his mind. "I have a friend who wants to find a few people to form a mercenary team. Are you interested?" "Mercenary team? You don't know?" "I know, of course I know." Gu Fei, who had paid attention to all aspects of the game, knew the settings of the 2 major organizations in the game. Guilds and mercenary groups. Guilds were like gangs in normal online games. In the parallel world, 1 person could nominate and 20 people would respond to establish a guild. Mercenary groups were a new setting that was different from normal online games. It didn't have a number requirement. Even one person could announce the establishment of a mercenary group. Then, they could accept mercenary missions issued by the system to earn money, experience, or other rewards. In addition, players or guilds could also go to the mercenary union in the game to issue missions and submit rewards. If players accepted the mission and completed it, they could also earn rewards. Of course, it was impossible for players to provide rewards in the form of experience. It would most likely be money or equipment. There was no conflict between guilds and mercenary groups, which meant that people from different guilds could also form the same mercenary group. But the current trend was for guilds to form their own mercenary groups. Although a mercenary group could be formed by one person, looking at the mercenary missions issued by the system, it was impossible for one person to complete them. This kind of lone hero would probably only be able to complete some simple missions issued by players in the future. Therefore, the fact that a guild could nurture a powerful mercenary group was a hot topic in the game at the moment. Gu Fei smiled and said, "Why, do you want me to join your Defiant Guild mercenary group?" Sword Demon smiled bitterly. "Defiant Guild has already disbanded." "Ah, why?" Gu Fei found it strange. Guilds currently had to be established by players at level 30 and players above level 20 to respond. Sword Demon was already 30, and Gu Fei thought that his Defiant Guild had been established for a long time. Chapter 16. Gu Fei's whites made the Sword Demon very resentful. What else could it be? It was all because of Gu Fei. A level 25 thief was defeated by a level 10 mage. No one would believe that the Sword Demon still had the same strength as before. High level? What was the use of that? A mage 15 levels lower than you killed you. Do you still expect your level to help you make a name for yourself? The group of people all had the same thought. Within 2 days, they dispersed from the Sword Demon and cut off contact with him. However, the Sword Demon was convinced of his loss, so he didn't blame Gu Fei at all. It was just that Gu Fei had a blank look on his face as he asked, "Why?" which made Sword Ghost feel a little dissatisfied. "Cough, that's nothing. Let's talk about this mercenary group. Are you interested?" asked the Sword Demon. "Oh, it's nothing. Let's go take a look," said Gu Fei. In fact, he didn't want to participate in this kind of activity that needed to be organized and disturb his personal time. However, looking at the Sword Demon's expression just now and Fireball's nagging about the situation of the Sword Demon a few days ago, he already understood what was going on with the Sword Demon's guild. He felt a little apologetic. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have been so competitive. He would have just let him know a little and let him understand in his heart. With the Sword Demon's personality, he definitely wouldn't have made things difficult for him and Fireball at that time. More importantly, Gu Fei knew the feeling of being ostracized by the people around him. And the Sword Demon was worse than him because of his appearance. This was simply too outrageous. It was too much for so many people to judge people by their appearance. Fortunately, he wasn't so ugly. It was human nature to sympathize with the Sword Demon and rejoice for himself. With apology, understanding, and sympathy, Gu Fei felt that he should give up his personal space and fulfill Sword Demon's wish. It could be considered as giving him some compensation. The Sword Demon didn't feel that Gu Fei's promise was such a big favor. He just nodded and said, "Very good. We've arranged to meet in the afternoon. Come with me." "Afternoon? What time in the afternoon?" Gu Fei asked. 2 points, said the Sword Demon. "Okay." Gu Fei nodded. "See you in the afternoon then." Sword Demon nodded and re-entered the forest, returning to his training spot. As for Gu Fei, he stretched his neck and moved his shoulders. Then, he raised the long sword in his hand and charged at the monsters again. At 1:50 p.m., Sword Demon sent a message. "Where are you?" "I'm going back to the city." Gu Fei had been training in the training area. He estimated that it was almost time and quickly rushed back to the city. The parallel world didn't provide a way to quickly return to the city. The officials said that it was to make it as realistic as possible. The players all despised it and unanimously believed that it was nothing more than a move to extend the players' online time. After the game started, There wouldn't be a monthly card, only a timer card. This was the best proof. Very good, replied the sword demon. Where did you guys agree to meet? I'll go there directly, said Gu Fei. Little Ray's bar, said the sword demon. Oh, I'll go there directly, Gu Fei replied. Speaking of this Little Ray's bar, it was also a legend. Because this was the first player in the entire parallel world to open their own shop. The requirement for a player to open a private shop was level 20, but this wasn't the key. The key was money, the money to buy a house. The system wouldn't interfere if they trained on the streets, and there were no city guards to find them. But to truly own a store-like front, they had to buy it from the system. Although the city in the game was large, there were only so many fixed assets such as houses, so the value was quite high. No one expected that a player could really open such a shop at level 20, and it was a bar that took up a lot of space. Where did he get so much money? All the players racked their brains and only came up with one solution. Use RMB to buy equipment from the exchange hall, and then sell it in the auction house for game currency. Rich people. Everyone sighed. After accumulating so much money, he opened a tavern. Everyone was puzzled. Perhaps the tavern seemed to be doing well now, but when the open beta officially ended and the point card officially became popular, how many people would be willing to waste time here? Moreover, the system's taverns were diverse, but what about the players? Where could they get so many types of alcohol? Yes, the bartender in the game could make alcohol, but at this level, how much alcohol could a bartender make? Could it be that one could buy alcohol from the system's tavern and sell it in one's own shop? As it turned out, Little Ray's bar did exactly that. Buy at the original price, sell at the original price, but the system still collected transaction tax from the shop every day. It was basically losing money. Losing money and still doing it. Someone with aspirations. Everyone sighed. A rich person with aspirations with an ordinary name, Little Ray. This was the first name that became popular in the parallel world, although many people privately regarded it as an idiot. But no matter what, there were countless cities in the game, and players were randomly born in one of them. Such an awesome idiot was randomly born in Cloud City, and that was the pride of all the players in Cloud City. Of course, Gu Fei knew of such a famous tavern, and he had been there once with Fireball. He had also seen the famous Little Ray personally standing at the bar to sell alcohol. He spent so much money, and now he was still losing money every day, but he chose to stand behind the bar every day to serve the public. He didn't even seem to have reached level 30. What did it mean to be someone who had broken away from vulgar tastes? This was it. Half of the people who came to Little Ray's bar came to admire this rich person who had aspirations and had broken away from vulgar tastes. When Gu Fei arrived outside the door of Little Ray's bar, he looked at the system time. It was 2 o'clock sharp. He took a deep breath and pushed the door open. He looked around and didn't find Sword Demon and his gang. He was about to send a text message to ask, but Little Ray had already greeted him. Do you need my help? Oh, I'm looking for someone. Gu Fei described the appearance of Sword Demon. His appearance was so shocking that even ghosts and gods would weep. Gu Fei had just started when Little Ray had already pointed there. Private room number 3. It was a tavern opened by players. Of course, it wouldn't be as old-fashioned as in the game. Little Ray deliberately took wooden stakes and made several circles around the wall. Each circle was regarded as a private room, which was the style of a modern bar. Oh, thank you, Gu Fei said. You're welcome. Call me anytime if you need anything. Little Ray's smile was a model of the service industry. Little Ray. Gu Fei raised his finger and said, I know. Your real name must be Lei Feng, right? Just kidding. Little Ray laughed. Gu Fei smiled and said goodbye to him. He walked towards private room number 3. It was surrounded by wooden stakes. He couldn't get out of the door, so he pulled a rag over the empty space as a curtain. Gu Fei grabbed the rag and shook it as if he was knocking on the door. Come in. Someone inside said. Gu Fei lifted the rag and walked in. He saw the guy facing the door. 1 word, beautiful. 2 words, beautiful. For words, how is this possible? For words, how is this possible? For words, it's actually a man? There was such a person sitting right next to the sword ghost, who was facing the door. If it weren't for the flat chest and protruding Adam's apple, Gu Fei wouldn't believe that he was a man. It was this person. One of his arms was on Sword Demon's shoulder. When he saw Gu Fei come in, he raised his arm and pointed at Gu Fei. "Is that him?" Sword Demon nodded and said to Gu Fei, "You're here?" Gu Fei nodded. "I'm here." The beauty pointed to an empty seat opposite him and said, "Sit." Gu Fei sat down. Only then did he look at the other three. They were plain, ordinary, and had ordinary faces. Compared to Sword Demon and that guy, one ugly and one beautiful, these people were more like humans. They were so similar that Gu Fei couldn't find their individual characteristics. "Let me introduce you," Sword Demon said to Gu Fei and then started from Gu Fei's side. Unscathed in battle. Warrior. Unscathed in battle was a middle-aged uncle. He looked very strong and gave people a rather mature and steady feeling. "Hello." He introduced himself as he stretched out his hand. "I like warriors, so I will choose warriors no matter what online game I play. And I will always be the #1 warrior in all online games." Sword Demon added for him. "Hello, hello." Gu Fei took off his straw hat with his left hand and quickly grasped it with his right. He found that the other party's grip was quite strong. This was inevitable. Warriors would certainly work hard on their strength. Gu Fei was a full agility mage. His bones went soft when he grasped it. Fortunately, the other party didn't deliberately make things difficult for him. He let go as soon as he grasped it. It seemed like it was just a habit. Gu Fei could only smile bitterly. It was the first time in his life that he had suffered a small loss in a handshake. This is Brother Yu. He must choose a random class to play online games. This time, he is a knight. Brother Yu is good at collecting information and often notices details that others don't. Sword Demon introduced the second person. "Brother Yu? You don't look old." Gu Fei reached out his hand. "I'm sorry, but my name is Brother Yu. I took advantage of you." Brother Yu scratched his head in embarrassment. Then he reached out his hand to shake hands with Gu Fei. His smile was very kind. At first glance, he was a very easy person to get along with. Gu Fei smiled. "This is Yu Tianxinming. His best class is a mage. But this time, he chose an archer." Sword Demon introduced the third person. This person was obviously not old. There was no smile on his face. He had the kind of arrogance and defiance unique to minors. He was most likely a student. "Hello." Gu Fei reached out his hand. Compared to the previous 2 times, his attitude this time was the most serious. This was because he knew that the best way to deal with this kind of child was not to treat him as a child. Instead, he let him feel that you valued him. He didn't expect that Yu Tianxinming would be so childish that he didn't even fall for this. He didn't even reach out his hand. He just snorted through his nose. "But, damn child. Impudent." Gu Fei cursed in his heart. "Finally, this is the one. Han Family Young Master, my old partner in the game. His class is an Eternal Priest." Sword Demon finally introduced the person beside him. "You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.